Hello, everyone, and welcome back to True Crime with Kendall Ray. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me today. And if you're new to the show, then welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. And make sure to click subscribe so you never miss an episode from me. So, you guys, today, I don't even know where to start. I am going to be telling you about a absolutely wild case that really had my jaw on the floor as I was learning about the case, as I was trying to piece everything together and understand fully what happened here. So much of it still just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it does, but it's like one of those cases where you're just like, why? What is wrong with people? And it's another one of those, and these ones make me so pissed off, where it reminds me that you truly can't trust anyone in life, which is, I don't know, tough to wrap your mind around, but as I've learned over the years, very true. So I'm going to be telling you about the murder of Taylor Wright, who was a phenomenal person, a really cool person that I think I would have loved to meet her if I had the chance. She just seemed, I don't know, very interesting and really tough and overall just a cool human. And she was also a private investigator, which is another weird element to this case. Her life was very complicated, and she was in a bit of a complicated situation when she disappeared. And yeah, let me tell you, her case is just one of ultimate betrayal. All right, so we have a lot to go over today, so I'm just going to jump right in here and tell you about Taylor Ashley Wright. She was born on April 23rd, 1984. And she actually spent most of her life living in North Carolina, one of my favorite states. And actually, there are very few details available about her younger years, but we do know that DCF placed her in foster care when she was just 13 years old. But she actually wasn't there for very long, luckily. After she told one of her friends that she was planning on running away, he convinced his mom to take her in instead. And it's honestly such a beautiful story, but his mom, Nancy Murchison, agreed, and they ended up just adopting her. And their whole family agreed that she fit right in. One of Nancy's boys, Daniel, actually said that he felt like Taylor adopted them as much as they adopted her, which I thought was so sweet. Taylor was clearly in need of a loving, nurturing family life, and that's exactly what the Murchisons gave her. Nancy says that Taylor spent her teen years riding horses on their farm, very idyllic, and that she would often lay her head in Nancy's lap and tell her how much she loved her. And from what I learned, Taylor had this really soft and sort of sweet side that she showed just those who were closest to her. But she also had a tough side to her, and that was the side that most people saw of Taylor. There's no other way to explain it. Taylor was just in every way a badass, and she has been described as both mentally and physically strong, definitely physically strong, super, super smart, and someone who did not mince words, did not mess around. And this is important to remember. Taylor actually wore a necklace with a bullet on it, and then also a ring with the scales of justice, which I think tells you a lot about her personality. And these traits really suited her and the type of work that she wanted to do in her life, and that was to become a police officer. And eventually, she was sworn in as a Jacksonville, North Carolina officer in 2008. And despite being relatively on the smaller side, Taylor, like I said, took no shit. And this was honestly one of the many things that drew Jeff Wright to her in the first place. Jeff was Taylor's husband, and they had met a few years prior in 2003. And Jeff said that he really fell for her for many different reasons, but he especially loved how different she was from other women and could really hold it down. Not to mention the fact that their ambitions in life, their goals in life were very aligned. They were definitely on the same page, and that really worked well for them. Now, Jeff was a Marine at Camp Lejeune, and in addition to being a police officer, Taylor also had dreams of joining the military. However, because she had a bad car accident, that dream never came to life. And remember this car accident because we will be circling back to that later on. But anyway, being a police officer was definitely a great gig for her. She thoroughly enjoyed it. And I watched an interview with Jeff where he said that she wanted to match wits against bad guys. And he also mentioned that she loved poker because she loved the psychological aspect of understanding your opponent, which I think also really speaks to why she liked being a police officer. So things in their life were seemingly going very well. And in 2010, things got even better because they welcomed their one and only son into their lives. And Taylor absolutely adored her son, and she did everything that she could to be a good parent to him. I guess she really wanted to be seen as a fun mom, and at least from what I can tell, it sounds like she was. Now, of course, no one is perfect, and Taylor certainly wasn't a perfect human. And as you guys listen to this episode, I just want you to keep that in mind, that regardless of what she had done in her past, what mistakes that she had made, it, of course, doesn't make what happened to her okay. And I know you guys know that, but it's always worth pointing out, right? But as I was saying, Taylor and Jeff really did seem like they had a very happy life together. And personally and professionally, she was doing really well. And around this time, she became SWAT trained and was working her way up the ladder. That being said, though, in the fall of 2013, she ended up leaving her job in law enforcement altogether because Jeff and their son moved to Pensacola, Florida, as a result of a military transfer. Now, this was definitely tough for them, mainly for Taylor. She had to give up her job, and that was really, really hard for her. Her job meant a lot, and as I mentioned, she was very dedicated to being a police officer and wanted to work her way up. And instead, she had to become a stay-at-home mom, which I think was a bit of an adjustment. Taylor was a great mom, but of course, she had other passions and goals that she wanted to pursue, and she gave up a lot. But Taylor definitely tried to make the best of it, and she handled all of their household needs and really did take advantage and appreciate being able to spend a ton of time with her son. However, this was also around the time when their relationship started to sour. And I can totally see how something like this, such a massive life change and change in roles, would, take a toll on a marriage. So in 2015, Taylor and Jeff ended up getting divorced following a very rough period in their relationship. Now, I will say there are some differences in opinion about who ultimately wanted the divorce, but what isn't disputed is the fact that their relationship had really just been through the ringer at this point. Things were tough. And one of the toughest things that they went through, which is tough on any marriage, right, is Jeff accused Taylor of having an affair, and she denied it. I am not sure if she actually did have an affair, but after he moved out of the house, the woman that he thought she was having an affair with moved in. Now, whether or not this was an affair, I don't know, but whatever it was ended up coming to an end pretty quickly. But back to their divorce. When the two of them split up, they initially shared custody of their son. However, Taylor really struggled to find a steady job, so she decided to let him have full custody for the time being. And for some context, when things were really bad between them before the breakup, there was an instance where Jeff was videotaping Taylor during one of their arguments, and he was saying things like, "I'm videoing you, I'm taping this, I have proof that you're acting this way." And supposedly, and I'm not sure because I wasn't there, I don't know what actually happened, but from how it's been told, Taylor walked up to him and poked him in the chest and said, "Good, video this too." And this must have really, really pissed Jeff off because afterwards he called the police and she ended up being arrested and charged with battery. And he did end up dropping the charges eventually, but this prevented her from being able to find a job as a police officer in Florida, obviously. She did get hired as a private investigator, though. And once her life started to stabilize, she wanted custody back, of course. So by mid-2017, the two of them were still in the middle of a pretty nasty custody battle, and they were also in court fighting over their shared marital assets, which we will definitely be circling back to later on. But for now, you just need to know that tensions between Jeff and Taylor were high. And then you should also know that in 2017, Taylor ended up meeting a woman named Cassandra Waller, and their relationship got pretty serious pretty fast. The two of them met the modern way on a dating app sometime earlier in the year, and by early September, Taylor was already moving into her house. So things moved quickly, not as quickly as some of the cases that we have covered, but pretty fast. And I will say, though, their relationship, as much as they really did get along, they had a lot of chemistry and things were good at times, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Cassandra, who a lot of people call Cass, said that there was infidelity on Taylor's side and also possible drug use. Now, she's not here to defend herself on any of this, so just keep that in mind. But the extent of Taylor's drug use is not totally known. But according to Cass, Taylor admitted to her in July of 2017 that she had tried cocaine 3 times. And after she learned that, I think it was pretty upsetting to Cass. So there was about a week-long period where the two of them were no longer together. However, they did end up reconciling, which is actually when they decided that Taylor was going to move in. It was over Cass's birthday weekend in early September, and Taylor started to bring all her boxes over. And it's also important to note that this was when Hurricane Irma was headed towards Florida, which was a massive hurricane, if you remember. So they were preparing for that. There was a lot of chaos and just a lot to juggle. And Taylor especially had a lot on her plate because in addition to the move and all the other chaos in her life, she was only a few days away from a very important hearing in the custody case. But Taylor never made it to that hearing because on the 8th of September, 2017, she just vanished. Now, that morning, as far as we know, there was nothing going on that was out of the ordinary. Very typical morning. Cass said the two of them woke up. Taylor made them breakfast, and then around 10 a.m., Taylor's best friend, Ashley McArthur, showed up because the two of them were going to run an errand together. Cass was busy, but she was eager that Taylor had plans because she knew that spending the day with Ashley would give her some peace of mind when it came to that hearing. You know, she could kind of relax and spend some time with a good friend. And Taylor and Ashley had only been friends for like about a year, but had become really close in that time. And Ashley's husband, Zach, actually worked with Taylor, and he was the one who introduced the two of them. And what's interesting is Ashley was a former crime scene technician. So, you know, Taylor's a private investigator. The two of them clearly had a lot in common, a lot to talk about since they both worked in law enforcement. But anyway, they all go about their day on the 8th as normal. And for the first couple hours that Taylor was gone, Cass said she didn't notice anything was wrong. But towards the afternoon, Taylor was hardly responding to anything that Cass was sending her, or anytime that she called her, she wouldn't pick up. And when she did respond, her replies were strange, unlike her. Cass texted Taylor around 11:30 a.m. asking about the errands that she knew Taylor and Ashley were running, to which Taylor replied that she would tell her more about it later. Then Cass texted later in the afternoon asking if she was okay, but those texts just went unanswered. At 3:24 p.m., she wrote, "Are you okay? Could you reply?" But there was no reply. So eventually, Cass just goes ahead and texts Ashley, hoping to figure out what's going on, make sure everything was fine. And according to Ashley, everything was fine. But just to be sure, Cass asked Ashley to have Taylor call her. But Taylor never ended up calling her, and instead, Ashley does. And then Ashley explained to her that they had gone to her aunt's farm, about 30 minutes away in East Milton, and that Taylor couldn't come to the phone because she was on a horse. Ashley said that Taylor had been really anxious about the upcoming hearing, understandably, so they went out to the barn to have some fun and just get her mind off things. And at first, Cass felt just annoyed, irritated by the whole thing, but then she got pissed off when Taylor failed to come home at 5 o'clock, and they had dinner plans that night. So then she decides to reach out to Ashley again at sometime between 6 and 7 o'clock that night to ask where Taylor was. Where the hell is she? And Ashley's response made her even more upset because she told her that she hadn't seen Taylor since 5 p.m. And then, just like she had explained earlier in the day, Ashley said that Taylor was still super, super stressed about the court hearing. And so she ended up taking an Uber from Ashley's house to a bar and was going to get a drink. But she explained to Cass that she hadn't seen her since. And so Cass is mad and she's waiting and waiting, hoping that she comes home. And then just before 8 p.m., a message did come through from Taylor, and it said, "I'll call you later. I'm not angry with you, and I should have called, but I just needed to think. I am trying to get my life organized and on track." Now, Cass said that this message immediately sounded weird to her, which I will explain in a little bit, but here in this moment, it angered her. I mean, I would feel angry too. And the two of them were really finally starting to repair their relationship, getting the relationship on the right track. And she felt like now Taylor wasn't being honest, being sketchy. And yeah, like I said, I'd be mad too. And then she got even more upset when just before midnight, Ashley sent her a screenshot of a text that she got from Taylor saying, "I'm okay. I just need some time to think. The move in court is very stressful. I need a few days to myself. Everything is okay. I'm not doing anything bad." So now Cass is like, what the hell? A few days? What is going on? So in response to this, she texts Taylor and she says, "I'm saddened that you can text Ash, but not me. You need some days to yourself? What is this all about, Taylor? But this text and all of her other texts just went unanswered. And she had sent quite a few. She was really firing them off. And all of them made it very clear how angry she was. Things like, "This is not okay. Right now, I don't want you at my house. You have lied again and again. I don't think we can even be together. You lie, you don't know how to stop, you use drugs. I know more than you think. And finally, call me now, get home now, or move out next week." And I mean, you can tell from those messages how mad she was at Taylor for ghosting her, which I think is very, very fair. But then on September 10th, her anger turned into worry. And remember, Taylor had left on September 8th, and now it is the 10th. It's been 2 days, and she did say, "I need a few days to myself," but still, Cass knew that that was unlike her. So that's when she called the Pensacola Police Department and went ahead and reported Taylor missing. And she told them everything. Everything from the fact that Taylor was going through a major custody dispute that had a big hearing coming up. And also that as a private investigator, Taylor would sometimes joke that she knew how to make herself disappear. And this isn't a shock, but because of what they heard, the police ended up not taking it too seriously. In fact, the officer on the line told Cass that maybe Taylor was planning on kidnapping her son to disappear with him. So she, as in Cass, should call her ex-husband to warn him. And she was thinking, maybe. And so she did call Jeff, but that conversation only freaked her out more because when they spoke, Jeff said that he last heard from Taylor via text on the morning of the 9th. But their son had been trying to reach her without luck. And even though he was really young, he actually did have a cell phone so that he could talk to his mom frequently. And I guess she wasn't responding to him, which was super, super out of character for Taylor. And Jeff also said some really weird things to Cass about Taylor that really worried her, like the fact that she was supposedly dangerous, and he convinced her that she should be afraid of Taylor because she went to the police about her disappearance. He said that if Taylor ever wanted to become a police officer again, this report would completely tank her chances, so Cass should be afraid of her finding out. Basically, that she is going to be so pissed off when she finds out you reported her missing. Now, this was a side of her that Cass didn't know existed, and I don't even know if it does exist. This is just coming from Jeff, but these words really got in her head. And thankfully, this didn't stop her from trying to find her. Deep down, she just felt like something was wrong here. She felt very worried for Taylor. And so over the next few days, she began calling a bunch of hospitals in Florida and even some neighboring states, but all of that was a dead end. She also tried reaching out to Taylor's loved ones, but didn't get anything out of that either. And even Nancy, her adoptive mother, didn't know where Taylor was. And I guess Nancy also didn't know about Taylor's relationship with Cass, but that's not totally important here. But what's important to note is that during this time, Cass had very mixed feelings. And I think this is very understandable. There was a part of her that was really worried about Taylor, thought maybe something horrible happened, something's wrong, or maybe she's having some type of crisis. She was concerned for her, but then another part of her wondered if maybe Taylor had run away with another woman. In fact, Cass was so angry that she ended up calling Ashley and asked her if she would have one of her employees come pick up Taylor's moving boxes and bring them to Ashley's warehouse. And I'll explain Ashley's job more here in a bit, but basically Cass didn't even want Taylor's stuff around. That's how mad she was. And after a few days of flipping between angry and worried and angry and worried, on the 14th, she finally decided that something had to be done. So she reached back out to the police to make sure that they actually took a missing persons report. And this time, they did take it seriously, and a lot of people took it seriously. By this point, word had started to spread on social media, and her boss at the PI firm said that when he posted online, tons of tips were flooding in. A lot of people speculated that maybe this had to do with someone Taylor had been investigating, although some people, including her boss, wondered if Taylor left voluntarily. After all, she would know as a PI how to make herself disappear. And of course, there was a world where that would make sense, right? And it was something that the investigators had to keep in mind, but they also had to consider foul play. And right off the bat, the two lead investigators had some people they wanted to speak with. And of course, those people were Cass, Jeff, and Ashley, starting with Cass because she was the one to report Taylor missing. So in those early days, her house was the target of a search. And she said this was really hard for her because even though she was cooperative, she felt like they were treating her as a suspect. And that's because they were treating her as a suspect. She was definitely a suspect to them. And all of it was really hard for her because she had all these mixed emotions thinking like, maybe Taylor is voluntarily missing and had run off with someone else. And that was really tough to wrap her mind around. But at the same time, to have people looking at you as if you did something wrong when you didn't, that you had possibly harmed the, someone you really, really care about, that's got to be really a hard pill to swallow. She said at one point there were investigators even crawling underneath her house, and she just stood there on the front porch crying. And she said the whole thing just felt really embarrassing.
The first thing we did with this case was contacted Cassandra Waller.
There was a time they came to my house, and at one point, Detective Gigliotti crawled under my house. I'm sitting on the front porch with Detective Wilhite bawling my eyes out because this is embarrassing. Why am I being looked at?
So thankfully, I can report that they did not find Taylor there, but they did find her ID and passport, as well as a cashier's check in her name for $19,000. And these things are what partially convinced them that she didn't purposely leave. Because, of course, who runs away without $19,000? When you have it available and you're going to run away, you're going to take it. And they're also wondering where this money came from and why was there a revolver with a missing bullet in Cass's house. Right off the bat, that's not looking so good for Cass, right? That is very concerning, but Cass did explain everything when she went in for questioning. The gun was actually something that she borrowed after she got freaked out from her conversation with Jeff. And as for the money, I'll explain in a second. Now, there were a lot of takeaways from Cass's interview, but there were two really big things that investigators latched onto. One, which I've already explained, that Taylor and Jeff's divorce had been incredibly contentious. And the other was that she was becoming frustrated with Ashley because Ashley had something of hers that she wasn't giving back. Now, of course, I mentioned that tensions were high between Taylor and Jeff and that, it's pretty obvious them going through this divorce and custody battle all of this time later. And I mentioned the dispute earlier, but what I haven't told you about yet is the money. Remember that car accident that I brought up in the beginning? That was so bad that Taylor wasn't able to join the military because of it. Well, Taylor had been awarded a $100,000 settlement from that. And when she and Jeff got married, they put that into a joint account. But once they were splitting up, Taylor felt like that money belonged to her. However, technically, it was a joint marital asset. And this hearing you've heard me mention a few times had to do with both the custody dispute as well as this money. It turns out that in June of 2017, Taylor withdrew $100,000 from their shared bank account. And as a result, the judge ordered that if Taylor didn't deposit $25,000 into an escrow account before her next hearing, she would face a contempt charge and arrest. Now, bringing this back to Cass's interview, she explained that she did know about this whole situation, and she was also asked about the timeline of September 8th and what Taylor's communication was like, which naturally steered the conversation to Ashley. And that brings me to their second big takeaway. They learned that when Taylor withdrew that money in the form of cash and a cashier's check, she gave some of it to her best friend Ashley to hold onto until she asked for it back. Specifically, a cashier's check for $34,000. And Cass explained that to her and to Taylor's knowledge. This money was being kept in a safety deposit box at a local Wells Fargo bank. And I do want to add here that Cass seemed hesitant to point the finger at Ashley. And this is a side note, but she was asked if she thought that Taylor and Ashley could have been more than friends, and she didn't think that they were. She said that as far as she knew, they were just friends, and Ashley was someone that Taylor trusted. And Ashley had actually mediated the conversation between her and Taylor back in July when Taylor confessed to her about cheating and doing drugs. However, going back to the money situation with Jeff, Cass also told investigators that Taylor was getting really anxious because that court date was approaching. And Ashley was actually dodging her request to meet up and give that money back.
It seemed like she was getting paranoid towards Friday. She was talking about how she felt like something just wasn't right with Ashley. Taylor had been trying to get the money out of Ash's safety deposit box, Taylor said, for like 4 or 5 days. And Ash kept making up excuses and everything.
And what's interesting is the hearing was postponed at Taylor's request. And investigators later believed that this was done because she still hadn't gotten her money back from Ashley. And then Cass explained that the day that Taylor went missing, that was the errand that the two of them were supposedly running.
She was like, okay, well, Ash is coming over. We're going to go to Ash's bank and we're going to pick up my money and stuff out of the safety deposit box. Ash had pulled up. We hugged, we kissed, said, love you, and went my way.
So like you heard, Taylor was under the impression that the two of them were going to the safety deposit box at the Wells Fargo bank to get the cashier's check. And phone records even showed that she had repeatedly been texting Ashley about when they could meet up. She was really pushing her. For example, on September 5th, she said, any idea on a time to get to the bank? We only have 2 more hours to get to the bank. You almost ready? And then another 2 on the 6th saying, I have to get in that deposit box today and get those papers submitted by 4. I'm out of time. And then another text said, Ash, there is no way I will make it there and to the bank in 10 minutes. They are going to hold me in contempt for not paying child support and not putting the $25,000 into the escrow account. And then she sent 5 texts on the 7th, the day before she went missing, saying, I've got to get to the bank ASAP this morning and get into that box and deposit that money. I'm going to be held in contempt if I don't get that money into the escrow account. They could potentially put me in jail if I don't pay the child support, like today. Please don't be late. They are going to put me in jail if I don't make that deposit today. They're going to check your ID in order to get into that box, so I need you to come with me. Waiting for you at my house. Bank closes at 4. This is way too important for me not to do today. I am under a court order, or my ass will get thrown into jail. But all of these messages were met with some excuse from Ashley about why she couldn't meet up, and that was until September 8th, when she agreed that they could go to the bank. And remember how I was saying how Cass thought Taylor's texts were so odd that day? That's because she knew how important it was to her to get that money back, how she absolutely needed to do that day. So the whole going off to ride horses to like blow off steam and stress thing just did not make any sense to her because she knew that going to the bank was Taylor's number one priority, her only priority that day. And she was also thrown off by Taylor saying that she was stressed about the move because Cass said she wasn't stressed about the move at all. She was only stressed about the money and the hearing. And all of this information was huge for investigators because it now was pointing them in the direction of Jeff and Ashley. That being said, though, let me be clear here, Cass was definitely still being looked at as a possible suspect. And there were moments in her interview where they felt like she was holding back, kind of being sketchy, not telling them everything, even though she completely denied having any involvement.
My intention right now is not to arrest you for anything. I'm trying to find out why your girlfriend's disappeared.
And here I am in this room that they would use to interrogate people, and it's padded walls. It's a place you don't want to be.
I can't help but be scared that I'm going to get in trouble for something that I did and I was trying to help.
If you knew who harmed her, would you tell us?
Absolutely.
If she was dead right now and you knew, would you tell us?
I don't know.
And then there was also a really weird moment about Taylor's laptop that made investigators wonder if she was telling them everything. I guess Cass had promised to bring it in, and then she didn't, even though she had brought in a bunch of other electronics and willingly gave those up. And she mentioned that she had already gone on the computer onto Taylor's and had found out that Taylor had some debt that she was hiding from her. So that seems sketchy. And then on top of all of that, they had to consider the fact that Taylor had cheated on Cass, and they thought maybe that could be a possible motive for Cass. But they ended up letting her go because they had nothing to hold her on at the end of the day, and there were other people that they wanted to speak to, which leads me to the next person on their list, Jeff. Now, when it comes to Jeff, he said that he was pretty certain that Taylor was choosing to be missing. He assumed that she left town with the money to avoid going to jail. And he explained to investigators how, at least in his perception, things got so bad between the two of them. For starters, he said that Taylor was the one who asked for the divorce on their 10th anniversary. He claims things had been rocky, but he was really pushing for them to stay together for the sake of their son. However, people who were close to Taylor, like Nancy, said that Jeff completely blindsided her by saying he wanted to end their marriage on their anniversary. And she explained that she had gotten all dressed up that night. She was excited to celebrate their anniversary, and then he dropped that bomb on her and she was very upset. But regardless of who actually ended it, though, we may never know, Jeff said that it didn't start off so contentious. He claimed to have offered Taylor half his paycheck, all her personal money, and 50-50 custody of their son, but he said that she rejected it. And he said that he even regretted calling the police on her during that one altercation I mentioned earlier where Taylor had poked him in the chest. But in the moment, he felt like Taylor was trying to provoke him, trying to get him to hit her. According to him, though, the thing that really set things onto a bad path was when she withdrew that $100,000. So everything with Jeff was clearly a he said, she said situation, and they weren't quite sure what to believe. And it sounds like Jeff was really trying to convince investigators that he wouldn't have a motive, but money and custody are definitely common motives in cases like this. So until they confirmed his alibi, Jeff remained a suspect. And that brings us to another suspect, Ashley. So back when Cass had told the police that Taylor had spent the day with Ashley on September 8th, of course, they called her up and she provided a pretty basic timeline of their day. And I'll get more into the specifics of that timeline here shortly. But for now, you just need to know that Ashley claimed that on the day Taylor went missing, they drove out to her aunt's farm in East Milton, among many other things. And she gave investigators the same timeline again when they went to speak with her in person at her house. And in this conversation, this time, she mentioned how Taylor was very worried about the upcoming hearing. And that is not something that she mentioned when they initially talked to her. And like Cass, she told them about all the money that Taylor had taken. She also told them more about Taylor and Cass's relationship, including about her infidelity and drug use, all of which suggested that Cass and Jeff might both have a motive. And at some point when they were speaking to Ashley, they asked her if there was anywhere else that the two of them went that day, specifically if there were any properties that they had gone to. And she was adamant, no, I told you everything. Now, Ashley did mention that she had another aunt who owned a place in the north end of the county, but she made it clear that they absolutely didn't go there. She told them that she didn't really know where it was or even what road it was on, but she agreed to ask around and figure out its location for them. And she also agreed to come in for a formal interview. And this interview is where we end up learning a lot more, not only about the day that Taylor went missing, but also about the money that she took. And here she is explaining how the day started.
Okay, so let's start that day from the beginning. At approximately what time?
Like 10:30.
And what happened at that time?
I went to Cass's house there, or Taylor's house, whatever.
Their house on Berkeley?
Right.
Was Cass there?
Mm-hmm.
Now, did Cass leave before y'all, or did y'all leave at the same time?
Cass was still there when we left.
Cass was still there when y'all left. From there, where did you go?
We went to my office.
So just a quick pause here so I can explain Ashley's job, which is confusing. I'll warn you in advance. And like I mentioned earlier, she used to be a crime scene technician, and I'm not sure when or why she stopped, but as of the time that all of this was going on, she and her parents ran this business called Pensacola Automatic Amusement, which was a company that supplied pool tables and jukeboxes and things like that, I guess, to local bars. And when she's referencing her office, that's the warehouse that I talked about earlier. Now, in the context of the day that Taylor went missing, Ashley explained that they went there because Taylor was planning on storing some of her moving boxes and wanted to see if there would be space. So with all that in mind, let's take another listen to Ashley.
So you were there for about how long?
Maybe half hour or so.
Okay. And what were the rest of your plans for the day? So where'd you go next?
We went back to my house, I believe.
And what was your purpose for going back there?
To get any of the papers that I had for her and the money and stuff for her.
So the money was being kept at your house?
Right.
How long had the money been being kept there?
It was only there for a few days.
Where was it at before that?
Taylor had it.
So this whole thing about a safety deposit box of yours, do you know anything about that?
Well, Taylor wanted to get a safety deposit box initially, but she didn't want her name or anything to be on anything that Jeff could find. So I was like, we'll just keep it and give it to you or whatever, because I don't know why she didn't keep it. She has a safe, and I don't know if it had to do with she didn't want cats involved with any. I don't know. It's hard to say what was going through her head, because I don't know why she was doing a lot of the stuff that she...
All right, so clearly this was a big moment to investigators, because Ashley is now saying that the money was never actually in a safety deposit box. However, of course, when they're looking at Taylor's text messages, they could see that she very much believed that that's where the money was. Let's keep listening.
And how did the conversation come up with her leaving the money at your house?
She just asked me if I would keep it.
And how did that go? Yeah, okay, or?
I mean, she was always there, so I mean, I really didn't mind. And
So let's go back. You were at the warehouse on Pace.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all were there for about 30 minutes? Where'd y'all go after that?
Back to my house.
Back to your house. And you were going there to get what?
The cash for her.
Okay. So did y'all end up getting that?
Yeah.
And then where'd you go?
We went back to Cass's house.
What'd y'all do there?
I sat in the truck. Taylor went inside. She said she needed to get some papers. And that's, I think, when she got her other bag. And she brought a couple, boxes out to the truck.
So she went and got a bag. What was in the bag? When you say a bag, like a garbage bag or duffel bag?
No, like a little, sort of like a tactical bag.
So Ashley seems to not know what's in this bag, but she is certain by this point that Taylor had her money. And the point that she's trying to make is that Taylor would have had everything she needed to run away, which, let me be clear, is exactly what Ashley says she believes happened. Either that, or she got caught up in some situation having to do with drugs.
Do you know who harmed Taylor?
No, I don't. I don't know that she's been harmed.
Did you harm her?
No, I didn't.
Do you know if Cass has harmed her?
No. I wouldn't think so. I don't believe Taylor's been harmed. I think Taylor's doing what Taylor does. The only thing that I can think, Taylor is a very tough person. She's always come across as being tough. She's always carrying weapons, whether it's knives or guns or whatever. The only thing I worry about is with the drug situation. I wouldn't even, if I didn't know about the drug situation, I wouldn't be worried about her. I would say Taylor's doing what Taylor does. But then that lifestyle.
Okay, so let's go back to Ashley's timeline because there's still quite a bit to go over there. So after Taylor came out of Cass's place with her bag, she says that the two of them drove by some house that Taylor wanted to see, something to do with her work as a PI. Then after that, the two of them stopped at a gas station. And Ashley says that's when she bought Taylor a beer.
You said, I think when I talked to you last time, y'all stopped somewhere.
At a gas station.
Store. What'd y'all do at the store?
She was on the phone, and I went in the store, got a drink, and got her another beer.
How much had she been drinking that day?
She had a Yeti type cup thing full of beer.
I mean, was she intoxicated?
She didn't seem to be, but I mean, I don't drink at 10 o'clock in the morning either, so I don't.
Sure. I mean, did she seem like she was getting a little buzz?
Not really. I mean, I didn't think so.
Have you ever seen her drinking at that time of day before?
No.
That was odd behavior.
And in fact, I said something to her. I was like, beer at this time of the morning? She's like, well, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. I'm like...
It's a perfect response for any argument. Well...
I'm like, brutal.
And then after that is when she said they went up to her aunt's farm in East Milton, which she said was something they just did spontaneously to try and help get Taylor's mind off of that court hearing. Then afterwards, they went back to Ashley's house. And lastly, Ashley claimed that Taylor grabbed an Uber and then went to the bar, just like she had told Cass earlier.
Just to finish up that last day, y'all went and took this scenic highway north, and then from there you went to the farm.
Right.
And who owns that farm?
My aunt.
And y'all were out there for how long?
Probably maybe an hour.
And then from there you went?
Back to my house.
Back to your place. And when y'all get back to Raintree, can you kind of describe to me what the mood was like, the conversation was like?
She was fine. She just said that she wanted to go have a beer and that she was going to get an Uber to take her to go have a beer. And I said, well, I can just drop you back off at your car. And she's like, well, I don't want to drive.
Did she ever mention anything about having a friend come pick her up?
She didn't, but I mean, I couldn't tell you if she was going to or, you know what I mean, if she really had an Uber come or if it was somebody that was picking her up. I went inside, and when I came back out, she was already.
And besides Taylor's anxiety and, stress leading up to this court hearing, she said it was a pretty normal day. But one strange thing according to Ashley, was that Taylor had 2 phones, and she said this was something that was definitely not normal. So clearly, she is suggesting that Taylor may have had some secret that she was trying to hide. However, nobody else that they spoke with knew anything about this. So they asked Ashley if she would be comfortable with them going through her phone. They said they wanted to look and see if Taylor had ever communicated with her via this phone so they could try to track it. And she gave it over willingly. In fact, she offered to let them keep it as long as they needed to. It seemed like she was being really cooperative. She was definitely being very friendly with them too. I think some would even say flirty potentially, which if my best friend were missing, there is no way I would be acting the way that Ashley is. I mean, she seems very happy and giggly, just very odd. But anyway, investigators end up asking Ashley about what she thinks of Taylor and Cass's relationship. And she said that she didn't think that Taylor was really 100% in it. She said that she thought Taylor was definitely still interested in seeing other people, and she even mentioned that Taylor had once asked her if she wanted to have a threesome with her and another dude. She said that they never did, and she said no, actually she wasn't interested, but they asked her who she thinks may have done something to her. And she said that Jeff was the only person with, quote, real interest in it. But like I said before, she did say she believed that Taylor left willingly. I mean, why else, according to Ashley, would she have grabbed a bag, had an extra phone, and taken off with a cashier's check for $34,000? But there was a problem with this theory, though, because the more investigators dug into her claims, they realized that she hadn't been telling the truth. During their investigation, they learned that Taylor never actually called an Uber on September 8th like Ashley had claimed and also had told Cass. She hadn't used the app or any other rideshare app in months. And then there was also no record of any type of transaction that Taylor had made at a bar. So either Taylor was lying to Ashley or Ashley was lying to them, and they did not believe that Taylor was the one lying. And soon after they interviewed her, Ashley started to repeatedly call investigators to try and ask questions about the status of things. Just calling to see if there was any updates on her friend's case as a concerned friend. But it was in a very much let me gauge what they know kind of way.
Hey, Detective Taylor Wright, it's Ashley. How are you?
Well, how are you?
I was just calling to see if there was any update or anything going on. I hate to bother you, but I just thought I'd check.
And she also kept really trying to push the idea that Taylor was a drug user. But even with their suspicions at this point, investigators didn't have anything to charge her with. So they kept digging. And by this point, I'm sure you all feel the same. Things are looking pretty obvious, and Ashley became their one and only suspect because both Jeff and Cass had rock-solid alibis for the day that Taylor disappeared. So now all they needed was to figure out what happened, to find proof of Ashley's guilt. And once they went through her and Taylor's phone and bank records, that's where they found some major inconsistencies. Remember how Ashley said that she and Taylor went to her aunt's farm that day in East Milton? Well, turns out that they did go to a farm. They did go to one of her aunt's farms, but it wasn't that aunt and it wasn't that farm. And according to phone records, Ashley and Taylor's phones both pinged on a large property in Cantonment, Florida, which is 30 minutes in the opposite direction. And at first, investigators didn't know if this location had any significance, but when they decided to run Ashley's maiden name, Britt, into a property appraisal website, that's when they realized that the phones were pinging on a farm owned by another one of her aunts, the same farm that she said she knew nothing about earlier. Imagine that. They also saw that she made a series of phone calls to one number that day. And after digging into it, they learned that she was calling her cousin. And not to overcomplicate things, but this cousin was living on the farm at that time, and investigators believed that she was calling him to ask if he was home. And when they learned that he wasn't, they realized this would have given her hours of privacy there. Plus, and this was definitely one of their biggest findings, but it turns out Ashley had 1,000% lied to them about Taylor's money. Earlier, as I explained, she said that she only had that check for a few days and that she never deposited into a Wells Fargo safety deposit box. But that turned out to be a big fat lie. Well, actually, it was partially true because She didn't put it in a safety deposit box. She deposited it right into her own bank account. Bank records showed that on August 10th, she added Taylor's name to one of her accounts. And then on August 16th, records show that she deposited $34,000 into that account. And they determined that the signature on the check had been forged. And bank records also showed that only one day after the deposit was made into their shared account, that money was already gone. They then discovered a series of surveillance cameras which captured her making several suspicious transactions with that money, including images of her depositing large sums of money into other accounts that Taylor didn't have access to, which ultimately led them to believe that Taylor was killed by Ashley to cover up the fact that she stole this money from her. Oh, and it wasn't just the $34,000. There were also 2 occasions in July of 2017 that Taylor had given Ashley an additional $15,000 in cash just to hold on to. Apparently, those were also supposed to be kept in the Wells Fargo safety deposit box that Ashley told Taylor she had, but all that money was now gone. The problem, though, now was that they didn't actually have proof of a murder occurring. They had no idea what happened. So they had to go find it. So on October 19th, 2017, investigators ended up putting all their resources together. They not only brought Ashley in for another interrogation, but they also executed a whopping 3 search warrants, one at her house, one at her warehouse, and then one at that other property in Cantonment. And as those search warrants were being executed literally simultaneously, they were also interrogating Ashley. Their tactic, though, was to not let her know they were onto her, at least not right away. They actually got her to come into the station under the ruse that they were going to give her phone back. And their plan was to keep her there as long as they could and arrest her as soon as they got the call that someone found Taylor's body, because they were that confident that Taylor had to be there. So for the first part of the interview, they let her know they found some bank records and drew up some questions that they were hoping she could help them answer. And like the first time she came in, she appeared cooperative, although her body language definitely told a different story. She was a lot stiffer and a lot less, you could say, flirty.
We found some bank records that drew some questions. Can you tell me anything about you and Taylor and any sort of involvement with any businesses?
She needed to put money and whatever, and she also wanted to do some of the stuff with my t-shirt business and stuff as well. And so we added her to my purely Southern Wells Fargo account.
How do you, and just out of curiosity, how do you add someone to...
You have to go into the bank with that person, and they sign their portion, and then I sign.
And the questions they were asking her were definitely somewhat pointless. They were just kind of coming up with whatever they could think of, trying to stall. They knew that she was just going to keep lying, so they wanted to keep her there as long as possible. But they did strategically ask certain questions that could be later used against her. For example, they asked her if she ever signed Taylor's name on a check, but she said no, although she did say that Taylor owed her about $20,000. And obviously, she's just trying to come up with an excuse as to why she had pocketed some of Taylor's money, but clearly they weren't buying it. And at some point, the interview takes a much more serious tone. One of the investigators actually physically pulls her chair forward, and that's when they decide to confront her with the cell tower data, which proved that she had lied about their whereabouts. And what was her response? Well, she said that Taylor had a lockbox there with something she needed in it. And she said she didn't tell them about it earlier because Taylor told her not to tell anyone.
So what we did is we had the ability to plot all your phone calls for that day on where you were. And this it all starts at 9:05, okay? So 9:05, you're probably at home.
Right.
8:15, you're probably at home. Now, at 12:10, you are in here.
Mm-hmm.
We know that your aunt and uncle and Kyle own the farm there on Britt Road.
Right.
And it's showing that you're probably near that farm, or if not, at that farm. And you're there when this is the time when you're telling us that you're probably in Milton or headed towards Milton, because it's 12:10 in the afternoon. 12:10, 12:22, 12:46, you're still covering the farm. 12:47, 13:01. You're out here for quite a while. What were y'all doing out there at this farm? You know y'all were there.
We picked up some stuff that Taylor had there that we had.
What was there?
That she had stored. Some kind of lockbox that she had.
Why would you not tell us that originally?
Because she asked me not to tell anyone ever.
They also confronted her about the fact that a day after Taylor disappeared, her phone was still pinging in all the same locations that Ashley went. Remember that text that Taylor supposedly sent on the night of the 8th saying that she needed space? Well, yeah, that was a text sent from Ashley's house. Now, of course, she denied having her phone with her, but the evidence doesn't lie. Oh, and she was also seen on the 9th at Home Depot. One of the places that so many killers get caught on camera. It's always amazing to me. They really just go out and buy the supplies they need. It is painfully stupid, but yes, there was surveillance footage that literally caught her buying potting soil and concrete a day after Taylor vanished. And let me remind you guys, what makes this even more crazy and stupid is that we're talking about a former crime scene technician. Yes. How can someone who has worked fucking crime scenes be this stupid, this much of an idiot, this messy? How is there this much evidence? Which, don't get me wrong, I'm very happy she's such an idiot because someone in her position could have potentially gotten away with this if they knew what they were doing. And thankfully, she did not, and she didn't. But at this point, they still couldn't get her quite yet. And regardless of what they presented to her, Ashley just wouldn't admit to anything. So they needed to get that phone call saying they had found something. They had found potentially Taylor's remains, and they needed to get it fast. But that call never came in, at least not before Ashley said that she wanted a lawyer. So at that point, they just had to let her go. And the timing was so close because that call ended up coming in not long after she walked out. And yes, that does mean they did locate Taylor's remains. They were right. She was at the farm. That afternoon, October 19th, 2017, the skeletonized remains of 33-year-old Taylor Wright were found in a very shallow grave on Ashley's aunt's farm, located on Britt Road. Her body was wrapped in a hammock and covered with potting soil and concrete, the exact things that Ashley was seen buying at Home Depot. And her remains were actually found when someone noticed an area of disturbed ground just along the wooded tree line, and after carefully uncovering the debris, that's when they realized it was her. Dental records were later used to confirm her identity, but truth be told, they knew it was her right away because of Taylor's bullet necklace that I mentioned at the start of this episode. It was found in the grave, right where her neck would have been. And as for her cause of death, and this is so upsetting to say, but they determined that she had a single gunshot wound to the back of her head, meaning that her best friend shot her execution style, and it had to have been, like a sneak attack. She probably didn't know it was coming. So once they realized that these remains were Taylor's, they immediately arrested Ashley and charged her with second-degree murder, although that charge was later changed to first degree. And after this, investigators had to make those very painful phone calls to all of Taylor's loved ones and let them know that she had been found. And this broke my heart, but Nancy said that she had hoped that maybe Taylor was still alive and just being kept somewhere or something, but that hope just came crashing down once she got that call, and she described that moment as soul-crushing. And Taylor was really the daughter that she always wanted, because after giving birth to her first son, she had hoped that the second one would be a girl, and then he wasn't, and she didn't think a daughter was in store for her, even though she wanted a daughter very bad. But when Taylor came into her life, it just all made sense suddenly. And now it was like she was missing part of her soul. And then, God, I think of her son. He was so young when this happened, only 7 years old when she was killed. And now he will never get another opportunity to experience her love. And for no reason. There's just no world where he should ever have to grow up without her. But now he does. And for what? And even Jeff was very torn up about Taylor's death. He said he feels cheated that they never had the chance to repair their problems for their son's sake. And again, for what? For money. All of this over money. Greed. In how many cases is it because of greed? So justice was the only option here, and let's talk about how it was served. Back when Ashley was first put in jail, investigators were still considering the possibility that maybe she had help. And of course, her husband was the first person that they looked into. But when they called him to let him know that she'd been arrested for murder, his shock seemed genuine. And not only that, he also had an alibi for when the murder took place. Then they considered Ashley's cousin, the one I mentioned who lived on the farm and wasn't there that day, as far as they knew. Well, he ended up being questioned for like 7 hours about the whole thing. And like I said before, they did determine that he wasn't home that day. So he wasn't involved, but he did provide some good insight on the day after Taylor went missing, though. It turns out Ashley had texted him around 8:30 a.m. on the morning of the 9th, asking if he was awake because she was there at the farm, which he thought was a joke because she wasn't a morning person. But she wasn't kidding. She was at the farm. He also remembered that she had asked him about his plans for the day. And long story short, investigators believe that this was her attempt at gauging what time she'd be alone so that she could finish hiding Taylor's body. And they think that because shortly after this conversation was when she was seen on surveillance video at Home Depot buying that potting soil and concrete. She could then be traced going back to the farm, so it seems pretty clear that's exactly what she was doing. But anyway, her cousin gets cleared, and investigators start to piece together a more clear picture of what happened. And if you're following, and I know this case is somewhat complicated, but I think we can all agree here that the picture is pretty crystal clear. But of course, the road to justice sometimes, most of the time it feels like, isn't easy. And at times, it doesn't feel fair, and it certainly didn't feel fair in this case. Ashley ended up getting released on a $400,000 bond in February of 2018, and this stirred up a ton of controversy, as you can imagine, because nobody felt like she deserved to be free after what she did to Taylor. And then there was even more drama because apparently she wasn't following the conditions of her release. So a judge ordered that she had to remain at her mom's house until trial, but neighbors say they saw her at her house with her husband on multiple occasions. And that's not surprising to me because Ashley just seems like someone who doesn't think rules apply to her. But in the end, she did end up having to go back to jail before trial, but it wasn't for that violation. Turns out, 3 months before she was arrested for Taylor's murder, she came under suspicion for theft and arson. Yeah, apparently Ashley had been stealing money, shocker, from the clients at her business. Basically, and I explained this earlier, the way their business worked is they would rent out pool tables and jukeboxes with these different businesses, and then they'd share the profits 50-50 with the businesses who rented them. And the money came in via cash, credit cards, and then through a mobile app as well. Well, I guess Ashley had shortchanged this one business called Azalea Cocktail Lounge by $14,000. And when the owner of that business realized this, he arranged for the two of them to have a meeting. But surprise, surprise, when that meeting rolled around, she canceled the day of. And that prompted him to just drive over to her office or that warehouse to figure out why she was being so shady. And when he got there, he realized that her office, which stored all the financial records, was on fire. And as I'm sure you've realized, it was eventually determined that the fire wasn't an accident. So in an effort to get her put back in jail while the murder trial was still pending, they needed to charge Ashley with fraud, racketeering, and arson. Now, the trial for that began in January of 2019, and she was ultimately found guilty of organized fraud and racketeering, but not guilty of arson, which that means that her ass was going to jail no matter what, even if she wasn't found guilty of murder. But of course, everyone was still very much hoping that she would be found guilty of that too. Now, prosecutors were worried about the fact that she wasn't found guilty of arson because clearly she did it, allegedly. But that was based on circumstantial evidence, and she wasn't found guilty of that. So this entire murder trial essentially was on circumstantial evidence. Although I think we can all agree here, it's pretty damning circumstantial evidence, and I'd be shocked if a jury didn't find her guilty. So let's talk about it. So Ashley's murder trial began on August 26, 2019, and in the eyes of the defense, this was a slam dunk case. It was a father-son attorney duo who defended Ashley, and they believed that because there was no physical evidence linking her to the murder, the jury must find her not guilty. And they also called into question Taylor's mental state, as well as her use of drugs. The prosecution, on the other hand, was adamant that no other person shared the same motive, means, or opportunity that Ashley McArthur did. They argued that the cell phone data, security footage, and bank records would undeniably prove that she was responsible for Taylor's murder. And the prosecuting attorney definitely had an interesting strategy. She knew that the defense would try to point the finger at other possible suspects like Jeff and Cass. So she decided to just put everyone on the stand so that the jury could, just hear their innocence themselves, make a judgment call on them. And Jeff was first to take the stand, and ultimately, even with his frustration surrounding their situation, he not only didn't want to kill her, but his alibi was rock solid. The jury also heard from Cass, and her testimony was incredibly important because she helped establish Taylor's state of mind leading up to her death, specifically about how stressed she actually was about getting that money back in time for that hearing. In fact, on the evening of September 7th, the night before she was killed, Taylor and Cass went out to dinner, and Ashley ended up joining them. And apparently during that dinner, Taylor confronted her about the fact she was making it so difficult for her to get those funds back. So this, according to prosecutors, is what they believe triggered Ashley to set this plan into motion. Ashley knew damn well that Taylor was never going to get that money back. That money was gone and time was running out. And so therefore, she decided to meet up with Taylor under the guise that they were going to go to the bank and get the money, but there was no safety deposit box. There never was a safety deposit box, and therefore there was no trip to the bank. She knew exactly what she was going to do before she even picked her up. And it's frustrating to think about, but we may never know how Ashley convinced Taylor to go to the farm that day. But that is where prosecutors say she killed her, wrapped her up in a hammock, and then buried her in a shallow grave and covered her with potting soil and concrete. Some people believe she may have even tricked Taylor and told her she ended up burying that cashier's check instead, but I'm not sure if we'll ever know for certain, and probably not. But regardless, that is what prosecutors say happened. And Cass's testimony really helped explain all of this, and her testimony outlined the strangeness of those texts, which are now believed to have come from Ashley, which I think was pretty obvious based on the fact that they were sent after it's believed she was killed, from right inside Ashley's home. And Cass also seemed to be really shocked by it all because Ashley was there for her in the aftermath of Taylor going missing. And that had to have just been such a mindfuck for her. I cannot even imagine. I mean, Ashley comforted her on many different occasions, saying things like, everything's going to be okay. Meanwhile, she knew they absolutely were not going to ever be okay. And not to mention the fact that Ashley was trying to help her figure out what happened. And I guess on September 14th, the two of them got together to go through Taylor's car to see if they could find evidence of anything. And they found some guns and knives, but that wasn't anything out of the ordinary for Taylor. She was a private investigator. But what was ironic is they did end up finding one of her duffel bags, which apparently was the same bag that Ashley later said Taylor had when she left her house that day, which is just more proof that Ashley is a lying lunatic. But if you're not convinced yet, just listen to this. On day 2 of the trial, the prosecution really wanted to make sure the jury saw her as the heartless monster that Ashley is, so they called 3 women to the stand, and they each testified about how right before Taylor went missing, Ashley was doing and saying very suspicious things. One of the women said they were all at this bar called Sticks Billiards on the night of September 7th. And that night, Ashley came in talking about how the world would be a better place without Taylor in it. And she testified that Ashley asked how much cocaine it would take to kill somebody, but then she took it a step further. Another one of the women, Audrey, testified that she actually drove Ashley to a strip club called Babes, which is known for selling cocaine, I guess. And she said that Ashley went inside and bought $250 worth of it. Audrey then said that Ashley told her she had planned to put it in Taylor's beer because if she overdosed, no one would think twice about it. Now, why this girl didn't immediately alert the police, I don't know. It's really frustrating to me. She had the power to save Taylor's life and she chose not to. And everyone's entitled to their own opinion on that. But personally, that really pisses me off. When you really start going down that road and thinking about how that could have been a moment that saved Taylor's life, potentially, It's infuriating. But that same woman also testified that on the 8th, she ended up asking Ashley what she did with the drugs, and she said that Ashley admitted that she tried to put it in Taylor's beer. But Taylor spit it out because she said it tasted bitter. Yeah, no shit, it tasted bitter. It's full of cocaine. She really thought that was going to work. This has to be one of the biggest idiots I've ever seen when it comes to a killer who is also in law enforcement. Unbelievable.
At some point after this night on September 7th, 2017, did you ask Ashley what she did with the cocaine?
Yes, ma'am, on September 8th.
Okay, that would have been the next day?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and how did that conversation go?
I think I asked, what did she do with it?
And what did she tell you?
That she put it in her beer and Taylor spit it out because she said it tasted sour.
But if you think back to that morning, remember how they stopped at a gas station and Ashley said that Taylor asked her for a beer in the morning? In fact, she told her, oh, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. It's okay, even though it's the morning. Well, I'm pretty sure she never asked for that. Actually, I'm very sure she didn't ask for that. I think instead, maybe it was Ashley's idea and it was going to be Ashley's attempt to poison her, but who knows? I will say the defense did get her to admit that she never actually saw the drugs herself, but because they weren't seen, obviously doesn't mean they didn't exist. And then the third girl testified that she said someone told her Ashley admitted to killing Taylor. She even said that Ashley once told her that she was too small to hurt anyone, but if she needed to, she would just shoot them, which is interesting considering how things ended up. And if that wasn't all batshit enough, it turns out that Ashley, and I guess this isn't much of a shock since she's such a fucking liar, but she was having an affair, which apparently wasn't much of a secret, but still. This guy named Brandon Beatty took the stand and admitted that they were romantically involved. And this does matter because he was the one that Ashley was spending money on. She was like his sugar mommy. She bought him an $8,000 motorcycle and a $30,000 boat. And Brandon testified that after Taylor went missing, Ashley told him, quote, "They'll never find that bitch. She's gone." What? Who says that about their friend? She is just so evil. It's just, when you realize these people walk amongst us, and Taylor thought Ashley was her friend. She trusted her so much that she'd given her all that money to keep safely for her. It's just unbelievable. And all the evidence, even if it was circumstantial, was pointing to Ashley at the end of the day. Prosecutors went through all of the times her phone had pinged on that farm and pointed out the sheer number of steps that her phone said she took that afternoon. They also played surveillance video from that Home Depot, which showed her buying that concrete and potting soil one day after Taylor went missing. Now, as you can tell, at this point, the defense has changed their tune, and they are definitely fighting an uphill battle. I mean, they originally thought this was going to be a slam dunk. Not so much, but I will say they did have one small victory relating to that concrete from Home Depot. They decided to bring in the Home Depot employee who had helped Ashley, and he testified about the type of concrete she purchased, which I guess wasn't a match to the type found covering Taylor's remains. But personally, just because she bought concrete that day, it doesn't mean that that is the concrete she used. She could have used a different concrete, or the Home Depot employee doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't know. Personally, I don't think that small detail overrides all the other evidence. The defense also tried to say that Ashley had a bad back from a car accident that she had been in prior, and they even brought in her chiropractor to testify to this. I thought that was pretty funny, but you know, any attempt that they can make here. Plus, they did point out that there was not a single trace of blood evidence or murder weapon that could be linked to her, which is true. And ultimately, in their opinion, they said Ashley wouldn't have needed to kill Taylor because her family had money, and any money of Taylor's that she spent was actually hers. They argue that Taylor owed her money, so that's why Ashley spent it. So really dumb argument. I think we can probably all agree to that. Last-ditch effort, but you know, what else are they going to say? But yeah, in the end, I'm happy to say that the jury saw right through their bullshit and Ashley's lies, and in just a matter of hours, they found her sorry ass guilty. And that was actually the only time during the trial that she showed any emotion. But poor Cass, man, she was a total wreck. She couldn't even contain her feelings when the verdict was read. It's so sad to watch. And I can only imagine what that moment felt like for her. But in the end, Ashley was sentenced to life in prison and will have to serve a minimum of 25 years before she's eligible for release in 2044. She did try to appeal that in April of 2021, but that was thankfully denied. And I'm sure most of you are going to agree with me here, but in my opinion, that is not enough for taking someone's life in cold blood execution style. I don't understand. But yeah, at least it's something. Now, I know this has been a long episode, so I won't keep you that much longer, but I did want to say in the aftermath of this, Taylor's loved ones have talked about how it's so important that we continue to remember her, not for what happened to her, but also for all of the great qualities that Taylor had. I mean, she was someone who was really a friend to everyone. She was the type of person who would literally give you the shirt off of her back. And of course, she was a loving mom. She truly loved her son more than life itself and only ever wanted what was best for him. And while she may have had some choices that, in the end, not everyone agrees with, by no means did she deserve what happened to her. And like I said at the beginning of the episode, I just think Taylor seemed like a cool person, like someone that would be fun to hang out with. And I just feel so badly for everyone who has lost her and will miss out on years and years of great times together. And it's just heartbreaking. But again, the biggest loss here is for her son. I mean, to grow up without your mother and to one day learn what happened to her, it's infuriating. But of course, as always, I want to hear from you. Let me know what you think about this case. I want to know what you think about the verdict and the sentence for sure. And just about what an idiot Ashley is as a crime scene technician to have made so many mistakes. It's just, although we're very thankful for it. Thank you for being so dumb, Ashley. But that's it for me today, guys. I will be back next week to discuss another case. And until then, I almost said take your mind a mile higher. That's the outro for my other podcast. What do I say here? Oh, stay safe out there. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of True Crime with Kendall Wright. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me today. And if you're new to the show, then welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. And make sure you click subscribe so that you never miss an upload from me. Now, today, guys, I am going to be covering a case that happened very, very close to me. I'm going to be talking about the disappearance of Nathaniel Holmes. And this occurred very shortly after I lived in the area where it occurred. And it was quite shocking to me to hear about this case because I never heard about it through word of mouth or through our local media. I had no idea Nathaniel was missing, which is just so frustrating because I've also asked people in my life if they have heard of Nathaniel, and none of them had. And this is one of those cases where I truly believe that Nathaniel is out there. I think it's quite possible he could still be in Colorado or in a state close by. So hopefully talking about it today will raise some more awareness and more people will be able to recognize what he looks like and know his name and spread the word. And now let's go ahead and get into Nathaniel's case, starting with some background information on him. So Nathaniel James Holmes was born on November 5th, 2000 to his parents Wendy Keatle and Ben Holmes. And he was raised in Arvada, Colorado with 2 sisters and 1 younger brother. I couldn't find that much information about his earlier years, but I did learn about an important life event that happened at a young age. When he was 8 years old, his parents got divorced, and his father, Ben, was granted sole custody of all of the kids. Wendy still did have a role in their lives and would have the kids to her place every Monday night for a family dinner, but aside from that, Ben took full care of them. And as you can imagine, this was a pretty tumultuous time for everyone in the family. As it normally is when parents get divorced. It can be very, very difficult on the kids, of course. But through it all, the siblings' bond really seemed to remain strong. And a lot of that was actually thanks to Nathaniel. His older sister, Hannah, said that he would put all of them first and always made sure that they were okay. And after a while, it seems like the dust sort of settled and everyone kind of got used to their new arrangement, how life was at this point in time. And even though it was a lot of responsibility for one parent, Ben absolutely loved it, and he called it the best deal. And I just gotta say, Ben seems like a very good dad who really treated them all so well and truly loves his children. And over the years, Ben was even able to take them on some really, really cool trips to places like Canada and Mexico, Scotland, and then even a month-long safari in Africa, which is just about the coolest trip I can even imagine going on. And not only were these trips a ton of fun, obviously, and a great way for them all to bond, but Nathaniel especially loved them because he was really into aviation. So I imagine flying to all these different places was just fascinating for him and really exciting. Nathaniel also liked to play video games, and one of his favorites was a crowd favorite, World of Warcraft. And he also had some other hobbies like hunting and fishing. But his biggest interest of all over aviation and the video games and all of his other hobbies was actually playing the bagpipes, which is super cool and unique. You almost never hear of anyone playing the bagpipes, especially at this age nowadays. And I've seen videos and pictures of Nathaniel playing, and it just seemed like he was super, super passionate about the bagpipes, and he really sort of came alive while he was playing them. And he was a normally pretty quiet kid. He was kind of known for being shy. So it was super cool to see him sort of come out of his shell while he was performing. And actually, Ben, his dad, plays the bagpipes as well. And he actually plays in a local band called Celtic Legacy. And I guess Nathaniel really wanted to play with them, but of course, these are professional musicians. And just because his dad was in the band didn't mean he could meet their standards. So Ben made him a deal. If he could get his abilities to where they needed to be, he could join in. And he said Nathaniel really took it very seriously and quickly went from an intermediate player to an advanced one very, very fast, which was really impressive. And so his dad held up his end of the deal. And in the summer of 2017, the two of them performed with the band at Colorado Renaissance Festival, which I don't know if Renaissance festivals are in every state. I'm pretty sure most states have them. But here in Colorado, it's a big deal. I've actually never been. I've always wanted to go, but I know a ton of people who go every year and are super into it. And Ben later said that playing there with his son alongside him was one of the best times of his life. But what's really tragic is just a few short months later, everything would change. And first, let me tell you a little bit more of what happened leading up to that so it makes a bit more sense. So around that time, Nathaniel had been attending Pomona High School, and he wasn't doing well there. He told his parents that he had a lot of trouble focusing in class because the pacing was just too slow for him. So it was actually his idea to try online schooling instead because he would be able to set the pacing himself, set it at his own rate, and they agreed to let him try that out. Unfortunately, after trying it for a little bit of time, it wasn't working. He was struggling with that as well. So his mom just said that he didn't have the self-motivation really required to make something like online schooling work. So instead, they ended up enrolling him at Hidden Lake, which is an alternative high school in the nearby town of Westminster. And the school promised that they could get Nathaniel on the right track to graduate on time. So Ben and Wendy had faith that this would be a positive change. But unfortunately, it wasn't a quick fix. And on top of that, he was going through some other struggles at the time. First, he got in a minor fender bender, which happens, of course. But after that, his car privileges were taken away, which, of course, as a teenager sucks. And then something else that sucks as a teenager happened. His phone broke, which is like the end of the world. So at this time, he didn't have a cell phone because it was too expensive to replace it. And so Ben was going to get him a new one as a Christmas present. So he was waiting for Christmas to come along. So all of these things combined, having trouble in school and changing schools and then not having a phone, not having access to a car, these things are really hard on a teenager. And his family noticed that during this time, he just seemed pretty off compared to his regular self. His personality seemed to go from being pretty happy to drained all the time. And his sister Hannah also said that he had completely changed and just seemed more overall down or depressed. But I'm sure they never could have imagined what would end up happening because only 5 weeks after starting at his new school, Nathaniel completely vanished, which takes us to just days before Christmas, December 18th, 2017. And that afternoon, Ben picked up Nathaniel from school, and right away, he just noticed that he was very out of it. He was nodding off, he was slurring his words, he was just not making any sense. So, of course, Ben questioned his son, and Nathaniel eventually admitted that he smoked weed and took Xanax while at school, but he said it was the first time that he had ever done it and never wanted to again. And as you could probably guess, his father was not happy about this. He was very upset, actually, and he told Nathaniel that he would have to be grounded and also receive some sort of other punishment. Didn't have time to figure that out, though. They had to pause the conversation for that moment because Ben actually worked evenings. He worked nights, and it was almost time for him to go to work. He had to go soon. So he obviously didn't want to leave Nathaniel alone in that state. So that's when he called over his mother, Wendy, so that she could, look after him that night. And she agreed. And since it was a Monday night, Hannah came over as well to have their weekly family dinner. And while they were eating together, Wendy described Nathaniel as being in a different zone. So because of this, after dinner, she decided to look through his things. And that's when she found more pills hidden in his wallet. And she obviously took them away. And then she confronted Nathaniel about it. And he was absolutely terrified. And not because his mom found his drugs, but because she took them, because he tried to explain to her that they belonged to someone at school, and whoever that person was would be really upset if he didn't bring them back. But she wasn't swayed by this, and she kept the pills, and even though he was really scared, he would still have to go to school the following day, especially because it was the last day before winter break. So the next morning rolls around, and Wendy takes him back over to his dad's house, his main home, to pick up his math folder that he needed for the day. And when he's there, he sees Ben and he tells him, the two of us are going to finish our conversation that we didn't finish yesterday when you get out of school. And it sounds like he wasn't super resistant to this. In fact, according to his parents, he seemed relatively okay that morning. Also, his sister Hannah recalls that he didn't seem too stressed or upset, just really in a hurry to grab that math folder and get off to school. So they exchanged their I love yous and wished each other a good day before Nathaniel left his home for the last time. And then Wendy dropped him off at Hidden Lake, watched him enter the school, and then went about what I'm sure she thought was going to be an average day. But unfortunately, that would not be the case. Now, Nathaniel was already late when he got to school, but instead of just going straight to class, he started acting odd. And I've seen what happened explained or reported two different ways, so I'm just going to share them both with you because I'm not quite sure which way it actually played out. So in one version, once Nathaniel got into the school, he went to the school office to speak with the principal. And then in the other version, he was outside of a classroom waving his hands to try to get the attention of his friend, Anthony, who was already in there. And that's when the principal saw him and came up to him. And even though that small part is unclear, there aren't any conflicting reports about what they discussed. Apparently, Nathaniel told him that it was urgent that he talk to Anthony, but the principal said that he would have to wait until lunch to speak with him. Then he told Nathaniel to go to class, but he replied that he didn't have to because he was switching schools anyway. And just to pause for a second, Ben and Wendy have both said that that was never a plan and they have no idea what he was talking about. And I'm not sure if the school principal questioned him about this at all after he said that, but after that, Nathaniel just simply walked out of the school. Now, you may be wondering what I was wondering at first, which is, does this school have cameras? Well, there's some conflicting reports on that too. I've read that there were no cameras, but I've also seen that there were. And they just didn't capture him leaving for whatever reason. I don't know if they're pointing a different way or he somehow avoided them, or the classic they weren't working is possible. Who knows? Either way, really, really frustrating, and it seems like no answers could be found there. And it's really, really frustrating when this happens in any case, but especially at a school. That is so disappointing. I've also read that there was a school security guard, but apparently he just didn't see anything, which I guess makes sense. If there's only one security guard for the school, they can't see everything that's happening at all times. But some of his friends did actually say that they saw him leaving, but they didn't think much of it at the time, which apparently none of the school staff saw him either because no one from Hidden Lake contacted his parents and let them know that he left, which is frustrating, really confusing, but at the same time, my high school was set up in a way where you could just straight up walk off campus at any time. Now, I haven't been in school in quite a long time. I graduated in 2011, so I don't know how it is now. It's really frustrating given the circumstances here for Nathaniel because things probably very well could be different if his parents were alerted right away when he left the school. And it's frustrating that he had just had this conversation with the school's principal, who is definitely the person who's most in charge of student welfare. I also don't know if their school had an open campus policy, because at my school, you could just come and go at any time. If you had an off period or a lunch break, you could walk across the street and go to the grocery store and pick something up or go to a restaurant or whatever. I don't know how things were set up at Hidden Lake, but cases like this definitely make you rethink when schools are set up that way. Obviously, it's very convenient as a teenager to be able to just walk off campus whenever you want. I loved it. But clearly, in Nathaniel's case, there just aren't enough measures to keep the students safe. And again, if they had enough safety measures, maybe I wouldn't even be telling you about this case today. But unfortunately, we'll never know. Here's the thing, though. Someone did end up hearing from Nathaniel after all of this, and it was actually his mom, Wendy. Now, after leaving the school, turns out he walked for about 10 minutes down the street to a park right outside of the Irving Street Library. And while he was there, he approached a woman who was walking her dog and asked her to borrow a phone because, as a reminder, Nathaniel didn't have a phone. So he uses this woman's phone to call his mom, Wendy, and he tells her that she wouldn't need to pick him up from school that day because his dad's friend, Michelle, would actually be taking him out to get some ice cream. Wendy said that she would check in with her to make sure that that was the plan, to which Nathaniel just said okay, and that he loved her before he hung up. And sadly, this is the confirmed last time that anyone spoke to Nathaniel. Now, Wendy is definitely questioning whether or not Nathaniel is telling her the truth. So after she hangs up with him, she calls Michelle herself and asks if she's picking up Nathaniel to bring him to get some ice cream. And she said that she was definitely not planning on picking him up and hadn't even talked to him in weeks. So that's when Wendy decides to go to the school herself and just sit outside of the school about an hour before class ended so that she could keep an eye on the door in case he was trying to sneak off somewhere. And she waited out there until school got out and then watched the kids leave the school, but she never saw Nathaniel leave. So at that point, she went inside to the office. And this is when they inform her that he didn't attend any of his classes that day, that he had left the school. And even then, they didn't disclose everything. She wasn't even told about the conversation that Nathaniel had with the principal, which is pretty important information. And the school wouldn't even inform their family about that until much later. And I'm really curious why they withheld that, or if they didn't think to communicate it, or I don't know what happened there. But it is really important context. But without knowing that part, Wendy jumped right into action. She informed Ben that Nathaniel had never gone to any of his classes that day, that he had left the school and no one knew where he was. And soon their entire family was out searching for him. And Ben later said, what I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, that he wished he had been informed as soon as the school knew that Nathaniel was missing class, so that they wouldn't have been hours behind starting their search. But they did all they could do right away. They checked his friends' houses. They contacted anyone they could think of that might possibly know where he is. And they drove around the streets near the school, but nothing came up. They also realized that all of his possessions, including his iPad, his wallet, and his ID, were at home. Plus, money in his savings account was never touched. And once they realize all of this and they're not able to find him anywhere and no one seems to have seen him, they are getting more and more concerned. And at 5 p.m. that day, his family filed a missing persons report with the Westminster Police Department, but he was quickly classified as a runaway, which unfortunately means the police did not handle it with much urgency. And I've gotten to the point in covering these cases where if I see someone has been labeled as a runaway right out the gate like that, I normally don't have the highest expectations for them being found, because less resources are just put towards runaways. The police take it way less seriously. It's just the facts. And that's exactly what happened here. A detective was assigned to the case, but very, very little time and resources were actually spent searching for him. And all of this was so upsetting and so confusing to his family. I just don't understand how police departments can even get away with declaring someone a runaway unless you have concrete evidence for that you actually know that they just ran away. And the evidence should be pretty high stakes, because yes, he did walk out of the school on his own, But he had never done anything like this at all. And who knows what actually happened to him? He may not have just run away. Something could have happened to Nathaniel. And yes, he had some turmoil in his life, but this was actually very out of character for him. He was always home. He had never even spent a night at another friend's house. So this was just, completely out of character for him. And his family couldn't just wait around and hope he would return and depend on the police department, who now just has written him off as a runaway. So just like so many other families out there, they had to take matters into their own hands. And I just have to say they were and are incredibly dedicated to finding him. They spent all hours searching and hanging up missing posters in Arvada, in Westminster, and other surrounding towns. They would go to all the spots that he was known to hang out at and speak to people there to see if anyone saw anything. But all this effort was leading to nothing. And they were all doing their best to find him. But I just have to say, Ben, as a father, really, really went the extra mile. He even sold his car because it was pretty recognizable. And he thought if Nathaniel was out there trying to hide, that he might see it and bolt. He made finding and getting the word out about Nathaniel his mission. And anytime that he saw a police officer, and I've never heard of anyone doing this, and I don't know if you're supposed to do this, but I thought it was interesting. He would stop and tell them about Nathaniel if he was just out on the streets with a police officer. But a few times, he would even flash his lights while driving behind squad cars to get them to pull over so that he could share the flyer with them. And he said that every time he did this, the police were actually very receptive to the information. But what was frustrating to him was, even though they were police in the area that they lived, none of them had ever heard of Nathaniel's disappearance. So after months of nothing, and I mean nothing coming up, they finally did end up finding something when they were searching the area of Arvada known as Old Town. And that was an area where Nathaniel would hang out a lot. I guess there's this church there that would do community outreach with the unhoused community. And while sharing the flyers there, some people said that they recognized him. Now, unfortunately, no one could pinpoint exactly when they saw him, so it was unclear if it had been recent sightings of him or if it was from times where he was hanging out there before he disappeared, because like I said, he did like to hang out there. But either way, I think as any family would, they took this potential lead very seriously, and over the years, they tried to follow it as much as they could. Ben actually went to thrift stores and bought old, worn-out clothes, and then he would dress down in them and walk among the unhoused communities to see if maybe he was there. Wendy and Hannah even made these little gift bags with, I'm assuming, like toothbrushes and other little essentials, but they also included Nathaniel's missing persons flyer, which I think is really, really smart. And Hannah said even if they didn't even look at the flyer or they threw it out, that it would fall on the ground and maybe someone else would see it. And I think it's a really smart idea to not only help the community, but to also get the word out. And they didn't just make an effort in Arvada, of course. They also searched unhoused communities nearby, including areas of Denver, Boulder, and even as far as Pueblo. Actually, even farther. Ben has even driven through areas of Utah and New Mexico. Unfortunately, though, no solid information or leads or anything came from any of this effort, which is, I cannot imagine how frustrating that is, but their family really held in there strong and they never stopped trying or gave up hope, even to this day, it seems. And they did think that maybe they came across a break in the case 5 months after Nathaniel disappeared. In April of 2018, Nathaniel's friend Jake called their family to say that he had seen him. Jake lived in an apartment complex right in Arvada, and according to him, a well-known drug dealer lived in his building. I guess while he was home one day, he thought he may have seen Nathaniel go into that specific unit. So he told their family, who then relayed that information to detectives. However, law enforcement has been very vague on the details of this, so I'm not totally sure how it was investigated. They have been unable to verify the sighting, and I would like to believe, I would hope that they spoke to this drug dealer or whoever lives in this unit, but I cannot confirm that. I also couldn't figure out if they tried to look at any cameras in the area, not just in the apartment complex, but just in the area as a whole. Because if he was around there, you would hope that they would do that. They may have, I'm not sure. I guess we just have to hope that they did. But even with the uncertainty of that sighting, their family still put up missing persons posters all throughout that area, but no tips were called in. And to this day, nobody knows who Jake actually saw, including Jake. I mean, years later, in an interview that was on an episode of Disappeared through ID Discovery, that he can't really be sure if that was Nathaniel. Maybe it was just someone who looked similar and his brain just hoped that it was him. But that's not all he said or revealed in that interview. He also said that Nathaniel's drug use was far more frequent and serious than his family knew. Now, based on what I've read, it does appear that his parents were concerned about him spending time with the wrong crowd, but it's unclear if they were worried that he was regularly doing hard drugs. It seems that the only time they became suspicious of that was the day before he disappeared, when he was clearly under the influence of something. But if you believe what Jake says, and he was his good friend, I don't know what reason he would have to make any of this up, but it seems like it was much more than just a one-time thing. According to Jake, around the summer of 2017, their group of friends was frequently using hard drugs, like cocaine, for example. And I guess these friends actually shielded Nathaniel from the drug dealers and would just supply the drugs to him themselves. And Jake claims that he had kind of stopped and that Nathaniel had confided in him that he wanted to stop as well, but he couldn't figure out how to. And it all came to a head that night before he disappeared when he called Jake, crying and pleading to help him get drugs. And Jake told him to relax, to get some sleep, and they could figure out a plan the next day. And it's interesting to hear and kind of matches up with what happened that night, that Wendy took his drugs away. And he was very worried about whoever they belonged to not getting them back. And all because of this, Jake wonders if maybe Nathaniel was going directly to drug dealers for drugs, and maybe he stole or ripped someone off, and then maybe he ran away as a way of trying to protect his family. And his mom has also expressed that she's worried that he left because he may have been scared of someone or something bad happening. So is it possible that he was asking for Jake's help that night because he had to find a way to get drugs to someone else? And that leads to bigger questions, like, was he so scared of that person that he left the school to hide out? And did something happen to him along the way? Did he come in contact with that person? Did he leave school to actually go and meet up with that person? Did someone confront him? Did it end badly? This is just one of those cases where you could sit there and theorize and come up with questions for hours. And then at the end of those hours, you could sit there and think, maybe I didn't even come close to guessing what actually happened, because nobody knows. I can't imagine going through anything worse, really, than just the agony of wondering for not just a day or hours, like most people who consume true crime. You spend a little bit of time worrying about it, thinking about it. But for most people who it's actually their loved one who is missing, they're just thinking about that for years on end. For Nathaniel's family, it's now been 8 years of them desperately wanting these answers, thinking of every possibility. And there have been times where they thought maybe they were getting close because there have been potential sightings over the years. For example, in January of 2020, about 2 years after Jake said he may have seen him, Westminster police received a call from a woman in Weatherford, Texas. She worked at a counseling center near a church that did a lot of outreach with the unhoused community. And one day, this young man came into her office trying to sell her bread. And she didn't really think much of it at first, but then later that evening, she was scrolling on Facebook when Nathaniel's missing flyer popped up. And she thought the guy that she had seen earlier looked like him, so she called it in. Now, this guy was actually captured on their surveillance camera, but it's not clear enough to really confirm anything either way. But Wendy has stated that when she saw it, she didn't believe it was him. And I couldn't figure out if anyone actually made contact with this person or if he was identified. But either way, it didn't give their family any solid answers. Then about a year later, they got their hopes up again in March of 2021 when police received a tip about a possible sighting in Gallup, New Mexico. A truck driver was stopped when a young guy approached her and asked her how long it would take to get to California. And she claimed they seemed to be very under the influence of something or having some sort of mental break. And she was concerned about how he was acting. So she told him that he should go back home. And apparently he said he couldn't because he was from Colorado and there were people looking for him. And she asked him what his name was, and he said Nate Holmes. And then after that, he just walked off. And she claimed that she was so weirded out by the situation that she ended up Googling the name afterwards. And then, of course, came across the missing persons flyers for Nathaniel Holmes. And that's when she called the police. And about 6 to 7 hours after the encounter, Gallup PD did a search of the area, but didn't find anything significant and couldn't locate this person. And when his parents learned about this, Wendy initially thought it was odd that the person said Nate because he always went by Nathaniel. But of course, he very well could be going by the name Nate. Maybe he is going by a different name now. Maybe it was another Nate Holmes who actually has nothing to do with Nathaniel Holmes. Or is it possible this didn't actually happen, that this person just made it up? Which of course does happen. There are weirdos out there, but I will say this, I don't know. It seems pretty strange I don't know. I guess there has been stranger. But I feel that I don't know. It seems to me that this truck driver probably really did encounter someone, whether or not it was Nathaniel Holmes or just someone else with the same name. I don't know. So once again, they're left with more questions than answers. And Ben has driven around several areas of New Mexico to try to find anything, but he never did. Now, whether or not this actually happened or not, it does tie into the next possible sighting, which was just a few months later in September of 2021. A woman in Oceanside, California called the tip line, which is kind of interesting because if you remember, the truck driver from before said that Nate Holmes was wondering how to get to California or how long it would take to get to California. And now there's another sighting in Oceanside. I guess this woman had been out walking when a guy approached her and asked her to borrow her phone. But when she gave it to him, he didn't actually make a call. Instead, according to this witness, this man went on Facebook and looked up the page dedicated to finding Nathaniel. And then he searched for Ben's profile page, which is very, very interesting if this truly happened. Now, she couldn't confirm if it was actually him, but she said it looked enough like him that she felt like she should call it in. Who else would be looking up Nathaniel's missing persons page? I mean, that's just so odd. And then to look up Ben, I don't know. If that's true, that is very, very interesting. And just like every other big tip, Ben jumped on it and he took it very seriously, so much so that he was on a flight out to California within just 8 hours of receiving that tip. But when he got there, this is so frustrating. I can't imagine how he felt. The woman who had called the tip in was ghosting him. And why? I don't know. And it's stuff like that that makes you wonder if that was just made up. Or maybe that woman just didn't want to get involved. I don't know. It's maddening to think about. But while Ben was there, he did still do some searching and passed out flyers. And he even went to a police department. But when he tried to give them a flyer, he claims they brushed him off, saying there were thousands of homeless people around there and didn't offer him any assistance. And unfortunately, none of these possible sightings have led to any answers. And the last significant one was now over 4 years ago. And unfortunately, I feel that we are no closer to answers than we were back then. And what makes it even more frustrating is there is so little to point to what actually happened here. I mean, if we believe these sightings, that could point to him joining the unhoused community and having sort of a transient lifestyle. But even if he did want to start a new life or has started a new life, it just doesn't seem like he planned much for that. Again, he was 17, but he didn't take his wallet or his iPad or any of his money, all of which you would think he would want to have if he wasn't coming back. And even though all of that was left behind, none of it pointed to any clues. And this is going to make you so mad, but his broken phone and iPad were never properly examined by police. So we don't know if there's anything on them that indicates that he had been thinking about leaving. So maybe it was an impulse decision to leave school, which could, again, indicate that he was scared of someone and felt like he had to hide. I keep going back to the fact that he was so scared when Wendy took his drugs, thinking, I have to give them back to someone. They don't belong to me, or I'm going to have to face somebody. seemed like he was very, very concerned about that. And it's interesting that that happened the night before. But then when I think about it, I also get hung up on the fact that this was the last day before winter break started. Like, if he needed a break from school and needed to hide out because of that, maybe he would have just gotten through a couple of hours and then he wouldn't have had to go back for a few weeks. Maybe that would give him some time to sort it out if he was in any trouble. But it's possible the person who he was scared of didn't actually go to the school and had nothing to do with that. And then, of course, there's the idea that he left school maybe to meet up with someone or to take care of a situation or who knows why, but then just came across the wrong person and something bad happened, or the person he was afraid of took action. I don't know, there's just so many different scenarios. But his family has not given up, and they are definitely still trying to get the word out about Nathaniel to this day. Over the years, they've held vigils, including one in 2020 where Ben played the bagpipes to honor him. And you can just see at all of these gatherings how much Nathaniel is loved and missed. And it just really breaks my heart and made me want to help them with their efforts to find him. And that's why I felt like it was important to cover this case today. Even though he left school on his own that day, it doesn't mean he deserves to be missing, especially after all this time. So I really hope maybe this episode will draw out some much needed attention on Nathaniel. And obviously, the more people who know about a missing person, the better. So please help spread the word about Nathaniel Holmes, whether that's through just sharing his missing persons flyer, or you could share this episode or share the disappeared episode on Investigation Discovery. I mean, any type of coverage, an article, just get the word out there if you can. And I also want to ask my incredible audience, which so many of you guys always do this, if you could please go ahead and follow the Bring Nathaniel Home Facebook page, which I will link below. I know that it just helps so much for these families to feel like they have as much support in their corner as possible, that people haven't forgotten and are standing with them. And before I go, I want to share Nathaniel's official description. So he is 5'9", he has blonde hair, blue eyes, and is Caucasian. And at the time of his disappearance, he was 17 years old and weighed approximately 140 pounds. And as of the date I'm recording, he would now be 24. And anyone with information should contact the Westminster Police Department tip line at 303-658-4360. And this always feels really weird to say, but Nathaniel, if you're out there and you happen to see this, I just wanted to say that I hope you're okay and that you're able to find your way home if that's what you want. But that is going to be it for me today, you guys. God, it is just always so hard to cover cases about children. I mean, Nathaniel was 17 when he disappeared, and now he's 24 years old. It's just so much time. It's just wild. But anyway, I will be back next week to cover another case. And until then, stay safe out there. And welcome back to another episode of True Crime with Kendall Ray. Thank you so much for joining me today. And if you're new to the show, then welcome. I'm happy to have you here. And make sure you click subscribe so you never miss an episode from me. So guys, today we're getting into a case that is, I feel like I say this pretty much every week. It's frustrating. It's frustrating for a different reason than it's normally frustrating, in my opinion. And that's because I still just cannot wrap my head around why this happened. There was a motive established by the prosecution, and for the most part, I agree with it. I just still wish I could understand more. It just makes no sense. And I guess sometimes with some killers, there is no way to make sense of the things that they do, that sometimes they are just pure evil and come out of deep-rooted insecurities and just being a total freak, if I'm being honest. And today we're going to be talking about the murder of 24-year-old Jackie Vandegrift, who clearly had her whole life ahead of her. And she just sounded like a fantastic human, but she is not the only victim in this case. There was also another young woman at the time. Her name is Caitlin Mathis, and I think she very easily could have ended up in Jackie's shoes. And I'm just so grateful that she wasn't, but it's devastating to think that the same can't be said for Jackie. It's a confusing one, and I feel that there's a good chance you're going to be left just feeling a little bit confused the way I am, where it still just doesn't make any sense. And with that, let's go ahead and get into this case. And as always, I want to start out by talking to you about today's victim, Jackie Vandegrift. who, like I mentioned, was so young when this occurred. Now, her full name was Jacqueline Ray Vandegrift, but like many Jacquelines, she liked to go by Jackie. She was born on March 4th, 1992 in Carrollton, Texas, to her parents Sonia and Ricky, and she also had one sister whose name is Jenny. And when she was growing up, Jackie, of course, had lots of interests, and one of her first interests when she was a kid was the show Thomas the Tank Engine. I was born the year after Jackie, and this show was so big when we were growing up, and she loved it so much that she would even reenact different scenes on her own little train set. And then, like a lot of toddlers, Jackie's next interest was gymnastics. And she has been described as having been a super high energy kid. And apparently she was doing somersaults before she could even walk. And eventually she managed to compete at level 5 in state competitions. Then when she was in middle school, she and her family moved just up the road to Frisco, where she eventually went on to attend Wakeland High School. And I couldn't quite pinpoint where this began. I don't know if her family was this way or she was just always this way, but Jackie was a super patriotic person. And of course, she loved celebrating the 4th of July, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, and every year she would root for the Navy in the Army versus Navy football game. And when I was looking more into her background, trying to get more of an idea of who she was, I looked at her Facebook account and I found one of her most recent posts. And it was from July 4th of 2016. And she wrote, "It makes me sad that this is the last Independence Day we get to celebrate with Obama as our president." And you know what, girl? I was feeling the exact same on July 4th, 2016. But anyway, I could also see from her Facebook that she worked as a cocktail waitress at Sambuca 360 and that she got her esthetician's license from Paul Mitchell, the school in Dallas. And I also learned that Jackie was very passionate about health and wellness, and her loved ones say that she cared a lot about people caring about themselves and wanting to see everyone thrive. And that actually fueled her desire to go to school to study nutrition and food science, with an emphasis in wellness, of course. And so Jackie started attending Texas Women's University in Denton, Texas. And by the fall of 2016, she was 24 years old and entering her junior year. And it seems like she had to make this little about me style introduction video for one of her classes, which I'm assuming probably was very uncomfortable, very awkward to film. I would have absolutely hated that. I know I am on camera all the time now, but back then, especially, that would have just been too much. I would have had to take a million takes. But as soon as I saw this, I knew I wanted to share because it really just shows you a glimpse of Jackie, and it's so nice to hear her voice.
Hello everyone, my name is Jacqueline Vandegrift, but friends call me Jackie. I am originally from the Colony, Texas, but I moved to Frisco when I was in elementary school, and I graduated from Wakeland High School. I am currently a junior here at Texas Women's University, and my major is nutrition with an emphasis in wellness. As far as my career aspirations go, right now I'm most interested in corporate wellness. I think more and more companies are starting to recognize the need to provide health resources for their employees. So I think right now that's where I'm wanting to go with my career. In this class, I hope to learn more about how to use the resources available to reach different individuals and to communicate effectively with the amount of diversity that we have in our community, as well as just building on my overall communication skills.
So yeah, I'm guessing that was for some type of online class. And yeah, it's weird to watch videos like that because it feels, on one hand, it's really nice to have someone's memory and the way they speak and talk about themselves preserved in that way, but it's also just very eerie. And on that same note, I did some more digging and I found her YouTube channel, and she has one video uploaded and it's an Ulta beauty haul, which I couldn't help but relate to that. You know, that's how I started on YouTube, was making like beauty hauls and little makeup videos and stuff. And like, I remember filming some of my earliest videos. They were very similar to how she did this one.
Hi everyone, so this is my first video and I am sitting on my floor. I was trying to decide if it would be more weird to do this sitting on my floor or standing in my bathroom, and I decided to go with this because this way I didn't have to clean my bathroom, and I think the lighting is a little bit better in here. So I'm really excited to be doing my first video. I've been meaning to start incorporating social media into what I do for work and my job, and I haven't really been good about that, but I think today would be a good time to start because I just did a little haul at Ulta. So let's start with my favorite product of all time, is the CeraVe foaming facial cleanser and the PM facial moisturizing lotion. I've been using these for like 7 years. If I've ever helped you with skincare stuff, I probably told you to buy them, just because I've tried so many other things and I always go back to them and they work really well. They work for a lot of different skin types. You could probably find some kind of face wash that would turn me into Beyonce or something, and I would still be like, no, I'll take the CeraVe. That's how much I like it. I think that is it. Thank you for watching. This is the first of hopefully many videos, so if you have any ideas, anything you want to hear about, any questions that you would like me to address, or just any comments, leave a comment below or send me a message on Twitter. If you're watching this, you probably follow me on Twitter, so just send me a message. And thank you for watching.
Yeah, again, just tough to watch. It's just, she's so innocent and yeah, I don't know what to say. I mean, I don't often get to find clips like that, and I feel very thankful when I do, and I get that glimpse. But then, yeah, there's something about it that's just really, really tough and uncomfortable to watch. And what makes it even more eerie to watch is that video was uploaded in February of 2016, and it's really hard to imagine, but in just a few short months after she uploaded that, Jackie would be gone. So that brings me to September 14th, 2016, and it was just before 6:30 a.m. when a 911 call was placed from Grapevine Lake to report a fire at Acorn Woods Park. And when first responders arrived, they were absolutely shocked to see that this was so much more than a fire, because there, inside of a burnt up blue kiddie pool, was the dismembered remains of a body. And the damage from this fire was so severe that at first they weren't even able to tell basic characteristics about the victims, such as their age or even their gender. But fingerprint testing was completed the following day, and it confirmed that these were the remains of 24-year-old Jackie Vandegrift. And when I tell you guys that not a single soul in her life could have seen this coming, I'm not joking. She didn't have some angry, scorned ex-boyfriend or really any problem with any of her friends, no enemies. This was completely out of the blue. Her friends and family just could not even begin to conceptualize who would have done something like this to Jackie. But investigators, on the other hand, it thankfully did not take long for them to identify a suspect, and that wasn't based on physical evidence. Because as far as the crime scene was concerned, there was actually very little evidence to point to who could have been responsible. Besides the 911 caller saying that they saw a guy standing over the fire who also drove away in a white-colored SUV, that was about the extent of their knowledge. However, when they traced Jackie's last known steps, someone stood out right away. Of course, one of the things that the investigators did right away was try to make a timeline leading up to her death and try to get a sense of her last known movements. And they were able to track her down to a bar on the night of September 13th, the night before. And this bar is called Fry Street Public House. And she was there around 8 p.m. or so, and she was actually there looking for a job. But through surveillance video, investigators could see that she ended up sitting at the bar and striking up a conversation with this older man, who at times can be seen touching her arm and flirting with her. And when they cross-referenced her social media, they saw that about 45 minutes later, she tweeted, "I'm glad I decided to get off Tinder and walked to a bar," which made investigators think, maybe this tweet could be about the guy that we saw her at the bar with. Maybe this dude is the one who was responsible, but it didn't stop there. So then around 9 p.m., Jackie and this guy, and also the bartender, can be seen leaving Fry Street Public House and heading towards another bar. And they ended up just down the street at a place called Shots and Brew, where, once again, he and Jackie can be seen on surveillance. And they're actually seen speaking with a group of women, and at one point, this guy can be seen handing one of the women his business card. And so they track her down. And once they did, they were able to identify him based on this card. And it turns out this guy was 30-year-old fitness instructor Charles Bryant. And that second bar actually wasn't the last time that they were seen together, because after they left Shots and Brew, which was around 9:45 p.m., Jackie could be seen in the passenger seat of his car outside of a convenience store, which Charles was seen entering alone. It was raining, so investigators believe that he likely had offered her a ride. But after this, the next time Jackie was seen was early that next morning, when first responders put out the fire that engulfed her body. And what is so creepy is that someone tweeted something from her account after she was killed, because it was posted on September 15th. So obviously it couldn't have been her. And it said, "Never knew I could feel like this." And I'm not going to spend much time speculating on what this means, because it obviously wasn't written by Jackie. It was written by her killer. And I don't know what they meant by it, or do I really care? So clearly it doesn't take a genius here to put the pieces together and realize that Charles is likely the one responsible for Jackie's murder. And so investigators start looking into him, realizing that he's probably their guy. And when they initially look into him, like right off the bat, they realize that he has a restraining order against him, and not from Jackie, from someone else, another college student named Caitlin Mathis. And the story of what happened to Caitlin is so closely linked to what happened to Jackie that I need to rewind back in time a little bit and fill you in on Caitlin's experience with Charles in order for you to understand how things happen with Jackie. And we don't have to go far back in time for that. Only 3 months. At the time, Caitlin was 18 years old, and she was working at a restaurant as a server before starting college at the University of North Texas in the fall. And that's where she ended up meeting then 29-year-old Charles Bryant. And it was actually the day after she graduated high school that this creep started making moves on her. And of course, he made himself out to be this great guy. He was a bartender at the Urban Cowboy, which is a gay bar in Fort Worth. And he was also a personal trainer. And just take a look at this douchebag's mirror selfies. Oh my God. Clearly, he thought very highly of himself. And I'd like you to notice how every selfie, he's standing like the same way. He's got his eyebrows slightly arched or majorly arched. And he always is doing some slight duck lip action. He really likes to push the lips up. I think he's going for like tough meets seductive. I don't know. But I hate everything about his selfies. And like we talked about recently, maybe last week or the week before, I can't remember exactly, the age gap thing is really tough, because I know in some relationships it's completely fine and some people function very well in age gap relationships and it's not creepy, but in this case, I think it is. I think it's very disturbing when a 29-year-old man is going after a woman who just turned 18 and just graduated high school, as in just graduated, like the day before, and you want to go after her? Why is that? And listen, I totally get where Caitlin's coming from. At age 18, it would be very enticing when an older man takes interest in you at a bar. I don't blame her at all. Of course I don't blame her. I blame him. But in fact, I actually applaud Caitlin, because after just a couple of weeks, she already started to see the red flags pop up about Charles, and things did not last long with him at all. She could tell very quickly that he was super, super possessive, I think very insecure as well, and also just a narcissistic loser. He clearly thought the world of himself. And I know I also just said that he was insecure a moment ago, and I really think those two things can exist at the same time. I think people who portray themselves as obsessed with themselves, who come across that way, have deep-rooted insecurities, and I think that is exactly who Charles is. And one of the main things that gives that away about him, because obviously I've never met the dude myself, thank God, but he tried to pull this whole "you'll never find anyone better than me" kind of bullshit, and that's something that only the most insecure of men manage to find the audacity to say. So long story short, thankfully, in August of 2016, Caitlin sees right through this idiot, realizes she wants nothing to do with him, that he's possessive and freaky and all the things, and she ends up breaking up with him. And I know her mom had to have been happy about that. And speaking of her mom, she actually said that when Caitlin first showed her a picture of Charles, she thought that he looked evil. And it wasn't just because this nearly 30-year-old man was pursuing her 18-year-old daughter. I mean, that was definitely part of it, but it was also because to her, there was just something about the way that he looked that gave her a deep, chilling feeling in her bones. And I totally see what she's talking about. I mean, just look at those eyes. Something just screams not right. So clearly, her mom was not for this relationship at all, but she also knew that her youngest daughter was going to do what she wanted and wanted to be supportive, and she was an adult, so really she can't force her to end things with him. But like I said, Caitlin quickly realized that he was a giant loser and ended things with him. And I'm sure you'll be absolutely shocked to hear that this big, strong, insecure little bitch in his heart was very upset and didn't want to accept that Caitlin was ending things with him, could not accept it. In fact, just one day after she dumped his sorry ass, he shows up at her mom's house and is begging her to take him back. And he made her a bunch of promises that he was going to change, he was going to be the best version of himself, blah, 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 the usual bullshit. And at first it worked, because sometimes it does, but it didn't work for very long because Caitlin was only back together with him for like a week, literally a week. And then she realized that he still sucks and dumped him. And this time when she dumped him, she told him, "Leave me alone. I am done with you. There is no more second chances. Get the fuck away from me." She was completely over it. And he definitely did not do that, because in the early morning hours of August 24th, campus police ended up pulling him over because they thought that he may have been drunk driving. But he actually was below the legal limit, so they had to let him go. He had some traffic violations that he hadn't paid yet, but it wasn't enough for anything to really be done about it. So he was allowed to leave. However, later that day, of course, Charles Loser Ass was back on campus. And this time he went straight for Caitlin's dorm room, which of course totally freaked her out because she never even told him which dorm she lived in, let alone which room was hers. And of course, Charles tried to make himself seem like less of a stalker by saying that, well, your name was written on the door. Her name was on the door. That's how I figured out where she lived. Okay, dude, what? So you went through every single room in the dorm until you found hers? And did you do that for every single dorm building? No, I think the most likely scenario is you were watching her. You were stalking her and following her. And you figured out where she lived. That is pure speculation. Hasn't been confirmed, but I wouldn't put it past Charles, okay? He's a freaky bitch. Of course he's going to be doing things like that. But anyway, he shows up at her door, and sources say that the two of them had a conversation in the common area. And I don't know how long of a conversation this was, but apparently they spoke for a little bit. And during that interaction, he tried to kiss her and she pushed him away. And even still, he begged her to take him back. But she wasn't falling for his bullshit, so she told him to leave and never come back. And Caitlin's very smart. And when he finally did leave, she decided to go ahead and report this to the campus police. She basically explained to the Lieutenant Polk, what was going on, which was what I've already told you, that she has this creepy ex-boyfriend who treated her really terribly, and now she was worried because he was showing up unannounced at her dorm. And huge shout out to this lieutenant. He is awesome because he not only believed Caitlin, but he vowed to make sure that she was protected, and he did his best. And I know just from cases that I've covered and my own lived experiences that a lot of campuses don't take things like this very seriously until there's repeated offenses or they feel like they have no other choice, but they moved quickly. Lieutenant Polk, I think, is a hero because immediately he issued a no trespassing order on Charles, which banned him from even coming on the UNT campus. But would you be shocked if I told you that that did not stop Charles? Because of course it didn't. And just a week later, his ass was back on August 31st. This time he showed up at her new job at Buffalo Wild Wings. He went inside, handed her a note, and then proceeded to ask someone at the bar if he could be sat in her section. And poor Caitlin, she is so freaked out by this, and she told him to leave, but apparently he wouldn't. And she even found out from a coworker that he had come in the day before and was asking about her, which is so violating and creepy, and just, I think, proves what I was saying earlier, that he was stalking her and figured out where she lived, because she definitely didn't tell him that she worked at Buffalo Wild Wings, but he knew that she would be there, that she just started working there, and he knew what day she wouldn't be there so that he could go in and ask people about, I don't know what he wanted to know, when her shift was, when she was going to be there. Who knows? And so Caitlin is totally stuck here. I mean, she just started this new job. And she tells her manager about the situation and that he was coming in and stalking her and just told him the whole story. And the manager said that there was nothing they could do about it, which there probably wasn't at that point in time because she didn't have a restraining order or a police report filed. All that they had was the no trespass order on the campus. But this just shows you how truly scared Caitlin was of Charles. She ended up quitting that job, even though she had just started. She actually decided to go back to the restaurant that she was a server at earlier that summer instead. And her mom even tried to convince her to move back home. But understandably, Caitlin wanted to stay on campus. I totally get that. Her experience shouldn't be ruined by Charles. That's so unfair. Caitlin also did contact the police again to let them know that he had showed up at Buffalo Wild Wings, and they ended up reaching out to him and straight up said that if he doesn't leave her alone, they were going to arrest him. But Charles can't do that. He can't control himself. He is a stalker in his soul. So what does he do? He shows up again at her dorm room. This time it was a week later on September 6th, which would have been their 3-month anniversary. And let that just sink in for a second. It hasn't been that long at all. And he is this obsessed with her. They didn't even make it 3 months. But anyway, this time when he shows up at the door, she looks out the peephole, she sees his ugly ass, and this time she's really afraid. Okay, there have been repeated instances. She's worried for her safety. So she goes and hides in her closet. And then in the closet, she calls the police and she's whispering because she's worried that if he hears her voice, that he will know she's inside and just break in or something. Either way, though, he knew that she was inside. And I don't know if that was because he was watching her or if he just, maybe he heard her or he assumed that she was in there. But he ended up saying something through the door along the lines of, Caitlin, I know you're in there. Just open up. I have something for you. Now, eventually, he did leave. Thankfully, it didn't get worse than that. But when she went to the door, she saw that he'd left flowers, which I guess was something that he did a lot whenever he did something wrong, of course. And he also left her a 2-page letter. And I don't know what he had to say in that letter, but if I were to take a guess, I'm sure it was some half-assed apology paired with some desperate plea to win her back and say how he can't live without her and all the typical bullshit. But Charles was not getting her back. That was not going to happen. The only thing that he was going to get was arrested because the police showed up 10 minutes later and found him outside the dorm area in his running clothes. Of course, he's not wearing a shirt. And they were able to arrest him for trespassing. Unfortunately, though, he was able to post bond and got released within just a few hours. Like I said, Caitlin is smart, and she knew that after he was arrested, that wasn't going to be enough for him to actually stop trying to contact her. So she took all the precautions she could at that point in time and blocked his phone number, blocked his email, blocked all his social media, blocked any way that he could contact her. But even after being arrested and being blocked on everything, that wasn't enough for Charles. He doesn't have the capacity to stop. He is a stalker. So he makes up a new email and emails her as soon as he's posted bail. And I don't have the full email, and I'm honestly glad that I don't have to read that nonsense, but here is part of it that tells you everything you need to know about it. It says, ... Here I am heartbroken and with a criminal record for bringing the girl I love flowers. And I don't know what type of melodramatic, sappy movie he was acting in his head, but yeah, he was the only character in that story. Caitlin, on the other hand, as soon as she gets this email, she's calling the police again, and she's feeling very threatened by his ridiculous, unhinged behavior. And when Lieutenant Polk heard about this, he wasn't having it. He stepped things right on up, and right away, he helped Caitlin get an emergency protective order, and since Charles was still trying to get in contact with her, he and other officers ended up going to his house on the 7th, and they arrested him for stalking. And Lieutenant Polk says that he told Charles that he was not going to stop arresting him, and he planned to use every single one of his communications with Caitlin to keep his ass behind bars. But unfortunately, he posted bond again and was free again. And following his arrest, Caitlin said that his friends, Charles, his friends, he had friends apparently, this guy, and they're messaging her, telling her to drop the charges. Because of course, I mean, according to Caitlin, she thinks that he fed them a bunch of bullshit saying that she was the problem, probably along the lines of, you know, she's crazy, my psycho ex, something like this, is ruining my life, and his friends fall for it and start coming to his defense. But there was no world where Caitlin was going to drop these charges. So then, like before, things settled down for about a week. But back to September 14th, that is the day that Jackie Vandegrift's body was found. And her body was found in an area which, not so coincidentally, Caitlin and Charles visited several times together while they were dating. It also didn't appear to be much of a coincidence that Charles was at Fry Street Public House the night before. Apparently, while they were still together, Caitlin told him this was an area she was excited to go meet new students. And all these were connections that the homicide investigators were able to make once they identified him as their suspect. And after they took a look at his record and saw that he had recently been arrested for stalking and that he had a restraining order against him, they got in contact with Lieutenant Jeremy Polk, who happened to be in the middle of a race when he got the call. And he's so dedicated to his work that he stopped racing. He sat down on a bench mid-run and was speechless when he found out that Charles was now at the center of a murder investigation. And I was so blown away by Lieutenant Polk. I mean, talk about someone who truly loves what they do, truly cares about the work they do, because when he heard about the murder, he immediately calls Caitlin just to ask if she was safe. And of course, he wasn't able to say why he was calling, but Caitlin already knew about the murder. She had heard about it. And she did say that she was safe. And thankfully, Caitlin was safe. Very happy to say that. But he didn't want to take any chances. And when he got the call that Charles might be their guy, he, of course, wanted to help bring him in. And it turns out that very morning, after he had done what I'm about to go over, Mr. I Can't Take a Hint sent Caitlin not one, not two, but 5 emails. And one of those emails included this picture of a tree from Grapevine Lake with text on it that reads, "First kiss under this tree, once upon a time, XXO." And the rest of the emails were a combination of pleas for her to drop the charges and asking if they could reconcile. Because nothing says, "I love you, baby, I want you back," than repeated stalking and harassment. I mean, what a freak. But anyway, with all this communication, Charles was once again violating the restraining order, so they were able to easily bring him back in. He was arrested again, and like I said earlier, they didn't have any physical evidence tying him to the murder at this point, so they needed a way to bring him in that was legit. So this worked out quite well. So on September 18th, investigators were able to question him about Jackie. And no shock here at all, but he completely downplayed any connection to her at all. See for yourself.
Obviously, there's been some issues that you've had up in UNT. This is an ongoing issue, correct? With Caitlin?
Yeah.
Okay. That is not what I'm wanting to talk to you about. What I'm wanting to talk to you is another case, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a picture of a female that I'd like you to tell me if you recognize who she is.
We started a bar.
Okay. What can you tell me about her?
That's about it, I guess.
So if you were listening to this episode and you didn't get to see that clip, you only got to hear it. When they show a picture of Jackie, the way that he cranes his head forward and tries to look like he's confused and he's never seen Jackie in his life, it's so obvious that he's acting. And even when the investigator is pushing, Charles tries to distance himself from her and made it seem like they hardly interacted, which is not true at all. Take a look at this.
Well, I mean, as far as did you ever get to talk to her?
Yeah, she was talking to us. She drank. I talked to anyone who's there, but not.
Okay. Did you ever sit with her, the other girls, ever hang around them and talk to some of them? Any interaction with them? Because the way you kind of making it sound to me right now is that you're kind of standing in one area and they're in the other area, and you're just kind of watching.
It's like this would be the bar, and then it's like literally just here, and they're over here.
Okay.
Over here.
So you're over here, they're over here, gap between the two of y'all, and what? That's all you recall?
I just literally drinking and BSing. I know she was talking to Katie about something. I don't know. I was there to drink.
Sure. So anyway, as far as any direct conversation with this young lady that you had?
I really just BSing, but nothing memorable. So I talked to a bunch of people that night.
Oh, God, the fact that he can even muster up this fake little laugh just makes me want to throw up. At some point, though, they've kind of got to give up the act a little bit and be like, dude, listen, we know that you know more than you're telling us. It's very obvious. I mean, are you stupid? We literally have surveillance footage to prove it. And his response Not the first person to use this. It's always amazing when people do this, but he just tried to say, I don't remember anything. Take a look.
Hey, Charles, I feel confident you know more than what you're telling us on this. This is one of those things that this has happened already, okay? But the thing is you need to really get out in front of this, because what kind of happens is that, if there's charges that are filed against somebody who has committed such a terrible act, it's one of those things that the jury gets an opportunity to kind of hear and see what's going on,
Right.
to see how this person reacted, maybe when contacted by law enforcement. Is this something they're remorseful for? Is this something that they're going to just completely continue to lie about it, So what I'm doing right now, Charles, is I want to get to the truth. You telling me that you just saw her at a distance is not true.
That's like, I don't know her. That's insane. It's like,
okay,
that's just blowing my mind now.
We have video from those bars at Fry Street that totally is different from what you're telling us and your interaction with her, okay? So reconsider what you're telling us right now, because every little lie that you tell us, it makes us doubt even the truth that you may want to come up with.
So I was drunker than I thought. That's like, I don't really remember anything. That's insane.
So insane. I just remember nothing. Very convenient. So he basically goes on to say that he was blackout drunk and doesn't remember anything that happened with her. And what's interesting is before they told him that they knew about the murder, they had asked him how drunk he was that night. And he said on a scale of 1 to 10, he was like a 6 or a 7. So I don't know if I'd really put that in blackout drunk, don't remember the entire night category, right? That'd be more like a 9 or a 10. And not only that, his dumbass even said that he remembered when and how he got home. So you remember those details, but you don't even remember this person's face. You don't remember anything about being with her. You don't remember anything about the entire night. It's just washed from your memory. You have amnesia for the night when it comes to Jackie. Okay, dude. So then eventually a new investigator came in and he called Charles out on all his bullshit. He explained to him that they were executing a search on his phone, his car, and his home as they were speaking, and they had already found a ton of evidence. Basically, they told him, look, dude, you're fucked. You better start talking. Because they also told him that they had surveillance footage of him at Walmart at 4 a.m. on the day that Jackie's body was found, buying a literal shovel. Look at that. God, this guy could not get any more stupid. And in addition to that, there was footage of him at a gas station earlier that morning buying gasoline. Did he not realize that this was 2016 and that everything that you do, everything that you buy is on camera? That you're not going to be able to get away with something like this by being like, oh, I don't remember. I was so drunk, I don't remember anything. And not only that, you guys, they also found her bag inside of his trash can, a military-style knife, a hacksaw with hair on the blade, several guns, a zip tie with visible blonde hairs wrapped around it, and a stun gun. Not to mention, they saw that there was a dead spot of grass in his backyard that looked like a kiddie pool had once been there, but now that spot was magically empty. And his roommate even confirmed that there had been a little kiddie pool there, but said it recently went missing. And his roommate also said that Charles had told him that he had dug some holes out there to make a koi pond. Yeah, he was really trying to convince his roommate that he was just doing a little fun project making a koi pond in the backyard. And not only that, they had already traced Jackie's phone records and saw that Jackie's phone had traveled to Charles's house that night after they left the bars, which lines up with the footage that they found of Jackie inside his car outside of the convenience store. In fact, her last phone ping was at a cell tower near his house. But yet with all of this dummy is still trying to pretend that he just doesn't remember any of it. Oh, and you're not going to believe this shit, but that night when he went to Walmart to buy the shovel, he ran into one of his neighbors, and I am not making this up. I could not make this up. He asked this neighbor how to get away with murder. And of course, the neighbor's thinking, this is a joke. I'm going to joke back. So he said probably by burning it. I don't know. At the end of the day, I don't know what Charles was thinking asking a neighbor that. Maybe the whole time he knew this is so bad, I am not going to get away with this. Might as well joke around. Because I don't know what he was thinking. He really thought denying all of this, saying he didn't remember, was going to work. There's so much evidence here.
Come on, man. We laid it out for you, okay?
Yeah, it's there. End up in Grapevine. I remember that.
We're over there at your house, okay? We have video of you with this girl.
Showed me.
You're at the bar. Her cell phone goes to your house. You're walking around Walmart at 4 o'clock in the morning buying a shovel. She's found dead in a pool that came from your backyard. Okay?
Yeah.
You can't tell me you can't tell me you don't remember.
I don't know why.
Come on, man.
Well, I'm giving you
You were there.
Obviously.
You did all these things, and there is no way in the world that a man could travel all the way from Hazlitt to Grapevine, from Denton to Hazlitt to Grapevine, and not remember. Stand up and man up and tell us what you did.
I don't know how.
Talk to me.
I'm trying
Tell me.
The past hour and a half I've been racking my brain.
There's no way, man. There's no way in the world that you do not remember this. There's no way.
Woke up. I don't even remember taking her home. I thought it was home.
She went to your house.
Yeah, I don't remember taking her to my place, man. I don't. I thought I went home by myself.
And you killed her. You killed her. And then you didn't just leave her there, you drove her to Grapevine. Tell me you don't remember that. Putting her in the car. Come on.
God, unbelievable. And the way he's just nervously laughing, trying to act so casual, it's so sick. As you can hear, this guy is absolutely just going in on Charles, listing out all of the things that he did, how there's just no way in hell that he doesn't remember this. Him trying to say that he is too drunk to remember just made no sense. And they just kept hammering it into him that they knew that he was lying.
And I can see it in you. I can see in you that you want to stand up and you want to take.
I'm taking credit for it. I don't know how it happened. I don't know why we end up in Grapevine. I don't know how I wake up and not remember this.
Because you come to Grapevine. You go to the park.
I just thought when I go to a place that I go, oh my God, it's it makes no sense to me.
Why would you leave her purse in your trash can at your house?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't get it.
Why would you leave zip ties from your car with her hair in it at your house?
I don't know.
But see, you laugh, and this is
because
not
it's blown.
laughing.
It's not laughing matter. It's literally you're in my face. I have nothing to do right now. It's like
I'm not in your face.
And as you can tell, the investigators are trying to use this whole buddy act with him. Like, we're friends, man. It's cool. Like, just fess up. I can tell so badly that you want to stand up and be a man right now and tell the truth. Like, they're playing hardball, but at the same time, they want to make him feel comfortable enough to just confess and make this easier for everybody involved. And as much as they're trying to do that, there is someone who is particularly known for being exceptionally good at doing this, and that is Texas Ranger Jim Holland. And this is when he was brought in, and he is known specifically for his ability to get killers to confess, even serial killers. In fact, they call him the serial killer whisperer. And that is really when there was a big shift, because he really cranks up the we're friends, buddy, we're comfortable, we're bonding to a whole new level. And it works so well on this dumb fuck. And he gets a confession fast. Charles ends up saying that he had to have done it because that's what the evidence says. But he says he still doesn't remember what happened. So I guess in a way it's sort of a half confession, if you will, but take a listen.
Tell me what's going on today. Why are you wearing the Village People outfit?
Right. Tuesday, it's like...
They didn't have anything else for you to wear?
That's it. I was wearing my shorts and I'm like, oh, I gotta change in this, but I don't mind. Yeah, it's crazy because I really don't remember meeting this girl. It's like I met her at a public house and
a public house?
Yeah, it's a bar in Denton.
Oh, okay.
And it's like he left there and I thought we kind of parted ways, but we were at another bar drinking and I thought, but apparently she was with me. Came back to my place and I don't remember driving home with her, which is insane. But yeah, turns out it was me.
You hear that? Turns out it was me. Oh, I hate him.
Oh, it's just nuts. Like, I don't even know this girl. It's like, I don't remember her name. And it's blown my mind because it's so out of character for me. It's like, I'm not an angry guy. I'm not aggressive. It's, I don't know. I've been trying to think over it last night.
Dude, the nerve of this guy trying to paint himself like this is completely out of character for him. No, it's not. No, it's not. You had this in you. You were born this way.
I just don't remember leaving with her. It's like, but I'm taking it's like all the events is on me. It's like, I'm just, I can't remember doing it. But it's me. It's totally me. There's no doubt about it, but I just want to go forward with it. I don't know where I'm going to go. It's like,
Right.
It's jail. I'm fine with that. One of the detectives yesterday was saying that Texas has a death penalty. I'm like, all right, great. I'm going to die in jail, but I can't fight it. It's obviously me. I can't remember doing anything.
So yeah, he can't just be a man and fully confess and own up to what he did to poor Jackie. Instead, he wants to pretend like, oh, I'm the victim. I just did this, I guess, and I don't remember any of it. And now I'm going to die in jail or maybe get the death penalty. Poor me. But Jim is really good at what he does. He wants a better confession than that. So he continues trying to establish more of a connection with Charles, almost by sort of helping him to make excuses for what happened, sort of putting these words in his mouth so he'll just come out and admit to being fully conscious during the entire thing, remembering it all. And he's saying things like, hey, this could have happened in a moment of psychosis, or this may have been self-defense, things to make Charles feel comfortable confiding more of the details.
How do we know that you weren't defending yourself and that you didn't freak out? There's a bunch of things out there we don't know, but there could be some legitimacy in that, the sexual stuff in the text. Maybe she came on to you too strong. Maybe she wasn't a 10. You didn't want to be with her. Maybe, she got mad.
He is so great at his job, his ability to even transform into a douche like him to try to get on his level, to say things like maybe she wasn't a 10, something like that, that's going to make Charles feel like he's one of the boys, he's one of the bros, He's so good.
Not mad. Maybe she's giving you all the signals and then cut you off. There could be all kinds of different things going on here, right?
Chicks, man, chicks. He's good. All the law enforcement in this case were just excellent. And for a little while longer, Charles keeps up the same song and dance of, it has to have been me, but I don't remember, the same bullshit. So finally, Jim walks him through a memory exercise to help him help jog that memory a little bit. And suddenly it works. It starts coming back to him. He said that he remembered offering her a ride home and eventually claimed that the two of them had consensual but kinky sex, which is what he said led to her death. Charles said that she wanted to be choked up with a zip tie and something happened. And of course, in that moment, he has to blame her for her own death. And as far as why he then didn't do anything to save her after he noticed she wasn't moving, all he says is that he freaked out. And this is very disturbing, but he even described how he dismembered her, put her into trash bags, and set her on fire to try and destroy evidence. So at that point, Jim continues with the act and suggests that maybe the motive could have been about Caitlin, but Charles denied that. And like I said in the beginning, that's one of the most frustrating parts of this case is there is no super clear motive, although that is what most people believe to be true, that the motive really is about Caitlin. Maybe he saw this young, pretty girl who in a dark bar somewhat resembled his ex, and after a few drinks, he managed to get her into his car, and at some point, a struggle ensued that resulted in her death. Or maybe he was taking out anger on her. And you guys heard the evidence. I don't know what else to believe. I think that's the closest thing to a motive we're going to get. I think that's the closest thing that makes sense, but I guess we'll never truly know why Charles did this to Jackie. But anyways, after hours of interrogation, Charles was officially charged with her murder, and they held him on a $1 million bond this time. Now, this news was a major shock to so many people, including Jackie's loved ones, of course. They just could not understand how this happened or who could have done this to Jackie. But this also seemed to surprise some of the people who knew Charles, some people that were friends with him or had come in contact with him. There was this one woman named Christy who had actually met him through a dating app back in 2015. And I saw an interview where she explained that there wasn't really a connection between the two of them, but she did continue to stay friends with him. And shocker alert, I guess he had come across super strong and she wasn't feeling the same way. But apparently he told her that he loved her after she had ended things, which really surprised her because they had never even kissed, which sounds right on par for Charles. But anyways, she learned about what happened and she thought back to a conversation that they had had where he told her that he was abused as a kid, which she said in her mind kind of made his attachment style make a little bit more sense. Of course, I don't think she's making excuses for him in any way, but he clearly craved female attachment and had horrible coping skills when things didn't work out or he was rejected. But when she learned that he had killed a girl, that was really surprising to her because she actually felt like he was harmless. Little did she know, though, he was the complete opposite of that. And as for Caitlin, she was also pretty shocked by the news. I mean, she knew that he was insane, but murder was next level. She did not think he was actually capable of killing somebody. And to make matters even crazier, when she went on Facebook to look up Jackie, she realized that they were already friends. She had gotten a friend request from her on September 17th, which, if you haven't already done the math here, that's 3 days after the murder, meaning Charles had used Jackie's phone after he killed her to friend Caitlin himself, which makes sense because if you remember, he was clearly tweeting from her account too. And what just breaks my heart here is that Caitlin feels guilty for what happened. She has actually said that she wishes this happened to her and not Jackie. And that's not something anyone should feel. Charles is the only person responsible for this horrific murder and nobody else. And the fact that she has to have those feelings, which I don't blame her for having feelings like that. I think it's only natural. I hope with time she's been able to understand that she had no fault in this and that she never could have seen this coming and that she did everything right in the position that she was in. It's heartbreaking thinking that she has to live with feelings like that. And that's why I said at the beginning that she's a victim in all of this too. Not just from what she went through personally with Charles and the stalking, but also from this murder. I mean, it's had a massive effect on her. And how could it not? Of course, the emotional impact of Jackie's death has hit her really, really hard, taking a giant toll on her. It's just so unfair. And my heart truly goes out to her and everyone else who knew and loved Jackie. It makes no sense. I think Charles is truly evil. Now, Jackie's loved ones did hold a vigil for her shortly after all this, and nearly 100 people gathered to honor and celebrate her life. Her parents thanked law enforcement for their support and professionalism, and her mom specifically talked about her daughter's multiple hair colors over the years as an expression of her creativity. Her best friend Jackie also spoke, and she told stories of their friendship and shared how they were the Jackies and how Jackie Vandegrift had always been there for her no matter what. And ultimately, as you can imagine, everyone was just determined to see justice for Jackie. So Charles's trial began in April of 2018, and despite having made a confession of sorts, I guess, he still, of course, big shocker here, pleaded not guilty. And his argument was that she died while they had kinky sex, and if he was guilty of anything, it would only be tampering with evidence. And his defense attorney, from the interviews I've seen of this woman, she pisses me off. I know it's her job, but the smugness, I mean, she just has to know damn well that he did it. There's so much evidence, but she fully, I guess, commits to the act that she believes he's an innocent man and will do anything to defend him. Again, I know it's her job. I sometimes have such trouble with certain defense attorneys. I know they're needed. I know. But how can you represent someone like him? Something like him, really. He's really a thing. But how can you sit there and lie on his behalf? I'll never understand it. I could never do it. But yeah, she tried to argue that there was no direct evidence tying him to her murder, although the circumstantial evidence is obviously very hard to ignore. Because not only was Charles the last person to be seen with her, but her hair and blood were found on several of the items retrieved from his car and home. Not to mention the fact that her phone last pinged near his house, and the surveillance footage placed him buying a shovel and gasoline hours before her burnt remains were found in a park. And don't forget, this was a park that he was known to go to. And investigators found photos from his Facebook page, which he had posted a few days before Jackie's murder, that showed that he went for a run at Grapevine Lake. And the path that he was on during that run would have taken him right by the area where Jackie's remains were later left. God, Charles is just such a moron. It's insane. And speaking of his Facebook, he also posted some super, super weird things on the night that he met Jackie, including a post at 11:56 p.m. on September 13th that read, "Teach you tricks that will blow your mind," which I don't know if that's really like freaky or creepy, but it's just like cringy. He's just so weird. And then there was another post on September 15th that read, "Full moon. Let's see what trouble I can get into." So yeah, the prosecution had a pretty damn solid argument here, but what they didn't necessarily have was a motive. I mean, it's believed that Jackie's death was somehow related to the stalking of Caitlin, but during trial, the judge ended up ruling against Caitlin being allowed to testify. She was brought in one of the days and gave her testimony without the jury present, but the judge ended up ruling that it couldn't be used, which is so frustrating and honestly just really traumatizing for her because she had to face Charles again. She was actually asked to point him out in the courtroom to tell them what he was wearing, so she had to look at him. And she said after she gave her testimony, she left the courtroom in tears. And to have to do all of that, to have to look at him and him look back at her, all of that, relive everything just for the judge to rule against her testimony being used, had to have been devastating. And it did make it slightly harder for prosecutors, but again, this case is pretty rock solid. I mean, they had a pretty solid argument as to why the defense's argument was just bullshit. Plus, it's important to note that there was no evidence suggesting that Jackie had intercourse before she was killed. So for their whole argument to be about how she died during sex didn't really hold up, did it? And luckily, the jury ultimately agreed. After a little over 2 hours of deliberation, they found Charles guilty of murder and tampering with evidence. Now, as for his sentencing, there is some disappointment there, unfortunately. He was sentenced to life in prison, thankfully, but he unfortunately has the possibility of parole in 30 years with good behavior. There's a chance that he will walk free one day. Now, he did get an additional 20 years for tampering with evidence, but that doesn't really do much because that is to be served concurrently. And for Caitlin, the thought of that is terrifying. It's just torture. She feels like she will forever have to look over her shoulder because of what she knows her ex is capable of doing and because of the way that he stalked her leading up to this. And understandably, in my opinion, she honestly wished that he got the death penalty. But because he only committed one felony, the death penalty was off the table. So, I mean, yes, of course, people were happy and relieved that justice was served here, that he didn't get away with this. But I get why they don't feel that life with the possibility of parole is enough. And I'm pretty sure in her shoes, I would feel the same way. What he did to Jackie after barely knowing her, spending a couple hours with her, is unfathomably sick. He not only took her life, but the steps that he took afterwards, the dismembering, the burning. Someone like that does not ever deserve to see the light of day, if you ask me. And I'm sure most of you will agree. Whether or not you believe he should get the death penalty, it's up for debate. And, you know, that's one I've always struggled with. So I can't say for sure, but can't imagine how Caitlin feels. I mean, the thoughts that she must have had and must still have thinking about how it could have been her. It's horrible. It's just horrendous. And if this sicko cannot get any worse, he was also apparently found guilty of possession of CSAM or child sexual abuse material. But I wasn't able to find out much about when these charges came to be or anything about them. But from what I can tell, though, it sounds like they found that material on his phone while they were searching it in connection with Jackie's death. So yeah, with that, that's really my final straw. I feel very confident in saying that this monster should never be set free. And I hope he isn't. I did want to leave you with one positive moment that happened after trial that I just thought was touching and thought you guys might agree. So the whole time since Jackie's death, Caitlin's mom really wanted to reach out to her family, but just wasn't quite sure how it would be received. But after the trial, Jackie's grandma actually went up to Caitlin and told her that she had been super worried about her over the past 2 years. And Caitlin's mom said that this was just really emotional for her because, you know, she was technically the person who lost their loved one, their granddaughter, in such a horrific way, yet it was her daughter that this woman was concerned about. And I think that really just speaks to the empathy that she had for Caitlin and how their family feels. And how no one blames her for what happened. And I really hope that that moment helped Caitlin a lot. Jackie's whole family honestly just seems incredible, and they've done some really great things in her honor. So I want to take some time to tell you about that. So they have established an endowment at Texas Women's University, which will help fund an internship through TWU's Health and Wellbeing Initiative. This internship will be in Jackie's name and will be set aside for a food and nutrition science major. They've also encouraged people to make donations to Operation Kindness, which is a no-kill animal shelter in Texas. And that's because Jackie was a huge animal person and a lifelong vegetarian, and saving animals was really, really important to her. Jackie's dad has said that it's been really difficult as time has gone on, and he'll never forget the last time that he saw her. He was watching football and she came into the room and they chatted for a bit. And he said that he wishes he told her goodbye because he never ended up getting the chance. He did say it brings him comfort, though, that she is buried close to their house so that he has a place that he can go visit her easily. Jackie was a caring, loving, and compassionate young woman who should have had decades longer of spreading her joy in the world. And I just hope in some way her loved ones continue to feel that and that others continue to feel that. And I think with the things that they have done in her honor, they will. But that is all I have for you guys today. I will be back next week to discuss another case. But until then, stay safe out there. And welcome back to another episode of True Crime with Kendall Wright. Thank you so much for joining me today. And if you're new to the show, then welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. And make sure to subscribe so you never miss an upload from me. And I also just wanted to say thank you to all of you who choose to join me for a bit of time every week. I know there is a lot of content these days on the internet to watch and listen to, and it's not lost on me how nice it is that you choose to, spend a little time with me. But anyway, you guys, today I have a really tough case, a very recent case. This just occurred in May of 2025, and we're going to be talking about Angelina Resendez. Now, there's still a lot that we don't know when it comes to this case. There is a lot of information that's being withheld. We are dealing with the Navy, so there's a lot of discussion we have to have about that. And I honestly don't know much about the Navy. I don't know anyone who has served in the Navy, and it's a completely, different type of world to me. So I had to learn a lot about it for this case. And, I have a lot of respect for Angelina, for her service, and for people who serve. And I'm also just really sad and disappointed in the way that this was handled and how horrible it has been for her family. It's really a case that should be talked about more. So I'm glad that we're going to be doing that today. Real quick, before we jump into the case, though, I have a bit of housekeeping. First, I have an exciting announcement. I'm going to be at my first Crime Con, which I really have not done many conventions or meet and greets or anything like that. And Crime Con is coming to Denver this year, and I live in Colorado if you didn't know, so I am going to be there. I will be doing a meet and greet on Saturday, September 6th from 1:40 to 3:40, and then we will also have a Mile Higher and Higher Hope booth at the exhibit hall all 3 days. We'll be popping in and out there, and then there'll be members of our team there throughout the weekend. So if you're in Colorado or you want to come to Crime Con and you haven't gotten your badge yet, you can use the code Mile Higher and get 10% off standard badges. I'll have a link in the show notes or description box of this episode if you're interested in learning more and coming. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into Angelina's case. And as always, I want to start out by telling you what I know about her. So the very beautiful Angelina Petra Resendez, or Angie, as she liked to be called, was born on October 31st, Halloween, 2003, to her mother, Esmeralda Castle, in Harlingen, Texas. And she had one brother, Juan, and 3 sisters, Jasmine, Sophia, and Aurora. And let me just say, from what I've read about her, anyone who had the privilege of knowing Angelina just was so incredibly lucky. I really loved the way one of her teachers described her. She described her as a lot like a flower, closed off in the beginning, but in time she blossomed into a beautiful and full of life type of person. It was her art teacher at Mexia High School who said that about her. And I don't have all the details, but I did learn that there was a 2-year period in high school when Angie actually went and lived with her. And it was in that time that Audrey, her teacher, said that she really got to see Angie's strength. She said that she was bold, independent, sometimes a little strong-headed, and was always someone who worked hard and took care of the people that she loved. And I also read multiple times that Angie was someone who loved very deeply, that if Angie was in your corner, she was someone who was always going to be there for you and back you up no matter what. She's described as warm. It's said that her laughter filled every room she entered. and her spirit was both contagious and unforgettable. And I think the strongest characteristic about her is that Angie was just unwavering in her passion for helping other people. And I think that's ultimately why she decided to join the Navy. She was incredibly selfless, and she had some family members who served in the military as well. So when she graduated from high school in 2023, that's the path that she decided to take. And she ended up getting stationed at Naval Station Norfolk, which actually happens to be the largest naval base in the world. And like I said at the start of this episode, she was a culinary specialist. And she had told her mom that one day she wanted to be able to cook for whoever was president, as well as other world leaders. And if Angie was given the chance, her mom thinks that's absolutely something that she would have been able to achieve. And just from the little I know about her, I completely agree. Angie seemed to just work so hard in everything that she did. She was so passionate and driven. And it was to the point where her mom said that she was sometimes scared to even miss work. I mean, you can just tell by looking at her that she was proud of her service and that she loved what she did. I think it's written all over her face. And even with the Navy's flaws, which Angie was definitely aware of during her time, she did love what she was doing, which is why it was so shocking to everyone when on May 30th, 2025, she failed to report for duty. And right off the bat, I just want to explain that when it comes to the timeline of events here, there are some discrepancies because we have what the Navy says and then we have what her mom believes, which are different. And I guess just bear with me while I try to break down everything, and I'll do my best to explain it from both sides. And also, before we go any further, I think it's really important context for you to know that Angie was someone who always kept in contact with her family regularly, whether it was her siblings or her mom or even her aunt, you name it. She was always just in touch with somebody in the family. She even had a 400-day Snapchat streak with a family member, which I think just really speaks to that. But anyway, according to her mother, Esmeralda, Thursday, May 29th was the day that her daughter stopped having any communication with anyone. And part of the reason that she knew that was because at 8:13 p.m. that night, she got a call from one of Angie's friends in the Navy saying that Angie had called him looking to be picked up. Now, I'm not sure where she was, but he said that she had told him that she needed a ride. However, when he went to go get her, he told her mom that she wasn't actually there. And so he tells her, Esmeralda, that she should call the quarterdeck, which, again, I'm not an expert when it comes to the Navy, but I believe it's just where she would be able to get in touch with Angie's commander. And so, of course, that's what she does. She calls the quarterdeck and she gets in touch with a guy named Chief Anderson, and she asks him what's going on with her daughter. And he basically tells her, oh, don't worry about it. We know where she is. She was just in another room. Anything you heard was overly dramatized. It's all good, more or less. So she says, all right, well, can you please have her call me? And Angie never calls. And she also doesn't answer her phone when her mom tries to call it directly. Now, as for the Navy, here is what they say happened that Thursday, May 29th. According to them, that day, Angie was on authorized liberty, which means that she had no assigned duties and wasn't required to muster with her chain of command on the USS James E. Williams, which is the ship that she was stationed on. Now, in non-naval language, that just means she was free to come and go, free to do whatever she wanted. She didn't have work that day. She was basically off. And like her mom said, the Navy agrees that Angie had reached out to someone that morning asking for a ride, but when that person showed up, she wasn't there. And to my knowledge, this person was her petty officer. And ultimately, when they came to get her and she wasn't there, the Naval Station Norfolk Base Police ended up conducting a wellness check in her barracks. They say this happened at 5:45 a.m. on that Thursday, the 29th. But Angie wasn't there. They did end up finding her, or that's what they say, at 10 a.m. in the barracks of another sailor. And so, as we know, Esmeralda called the quarterdeck later that evening, and I believe this is what the chief was referencing when he said we found her in another room. The problem with that, though, is they saw her in this other person's room hours ago at that point. So, to my understanding, they led her mom to believe that she had just been recently seen. So then Friday the 30th rolls around, and now there is a serious problem because Angie is no longer on authorized leave, and she's supposed to report back to the ship at 7:30 a.m. on that Friday morning, and she fails to do so, which is very concerning and very out of character for her. Now, this is when the Navy says that they listed her on the ship's absentee report, but to my understanding, and this is important, and we will circle back to this later on, no formal investigation was kicked off at this point, at least not yet. They basically just listed her as AWOL, which just means absent without leave. And I guess they were just hoping that she showed up again on Monday. And her mom says that she actually called back that day, that Friday, and spoke to another chief, and he told her that her daughter didn't report to work. And then she learned something even more concerning. And it was that the sailor that she was reported to have been seen with also did not show up for work on that Friday. And as a reminder, Angie was seen with this sailor on the Thursday before the day prior. But again, to my understanding, still nothing was done about this. And the Navy says that another wellness check was performed at 9:30 a.m. that day, both in Angie's barracks and this other sailor's, but neither were located. So you would hope that now with 2 missing sailors that someone is going to do something, right? Like clearly there is something very wrong here, but wrong. It wasn't until Angie's friends reported her missing to the Norfolk Police Department on Saturday the 31st that the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, or NCIS, was alerted. This was totally out of character for Angie, and anyone who knew her would tell you that not showing up for work and not responding to texts or calls was just a massive red flag. I mean, like I said earlier, Angie was literally scared to miss work. So to now have missed a full day of work without any explanation, it just doesn't add up. But even with NCIS knowing that she was missing on the 31st, a critically missing adult alert wasn't issued until June 3rd, days later. And what's worse is that the person who she was seen with on Thursday, the one who also didn't show up on Friday either, well, he did show up for work on Monday. Yet Tuesday is when they start ringing the alarm bells. And when NCIS did issue that alert, they said that they believed that she could be in danger. So if that's the case, then what's up with this delay? The urgency did not seem to be there for the Navy based off of what we know, but obviously it was there immediately for her mom. She flew out to Virginia that Thursday and was determined to do anything that she could to help look for her daughter. And to add to the panic and confusion that she was experiencing, Esmeralda said that nobody would tell her anything when she arrived. The only thing that they would tell her is that they were investigating her daughter's disappearance. That was it. Imagine having only that as your information when your child is missing. And I can't say I really know that much about their investigative efforts because they really haven't shared barely anything, which is incredibly frustrating. But what I do know is that according to the Navy, they were, quote, working closely with law enforcement to locate her. And that's basically all they said. They said they spoke with Esmeralda on June 2nd about the status of everything. But from what I've gauged, they were incredibly tight-lipped about everything else. And then the days started to just go by with no answers. And obviously, the more time's going by with nothing, the concerns for her daughter's safety are just growing. So most of what we do know about Angie's disappearance, and really this whole case in general, comes from her mother. And she said that at this point in time, she hadn't spent any money, she wasn't making any calls, and that she didn't drive, nor did she have a vehicle to drive. So how far could she have even gotten? Plus, when she was in Virginia, she went to her daughter's barracks, and Esmeralda said that she saw that there were personal items like food and a yoga mat just sitting out. So to her, looking at her daughter's room, it looked like she was very much planning to come back. Now listen, I will tell you that she did struggle with some mental health related issues in the past, clearly completely unrelated to what's going on here. And that will make even more sense as we go through. And who hasn't had mental health related issues at some point in their lives, right? Like extremely common. I just wanted to get that out of the way because I know people will comment about that. But in any case, this whole situation is not making sense. There's no way that Angie would just get up and walk away from her life without telling a soul. And even though what I'm about to tell you proves that that wasn't the case, I'm very sad to have to tell you this. But they soon found out that she didn't just walk away from her life. On June 9th, 2025, the NCIS and NPD responded to a call about a body that was found in a wooded area a handful of miles off base in the area of Broad Creek in Norfolk. And the remains were quickly taken into the medical examiner's office so that they could make an identification and begin the autopsy, although it was widely agreed upon that this had to be Angie. And people who lived in that neighborhood told several news stations that this was a quiet community and definitely not somewhere that they would ever expect something like this to happen. And as of the time I am recording this, which is August 15th, it is unclear if this location was where the murder actually occurred or if it was just the site where her body was dumped. I have my guesses, but I don't want to speculate at this point in time. And thankfully, more answers did come later that day. So in addition to the remains that were found, it also was announced that there was now a sailor in pre-trial confinement and charges under the Uniform Code of Military Justice were pending. Now, I had never heard of this term pre-trial confinement, so I wanted to understand it better, and here's my best understanding of it. It is defined as a form of physical restraint imposed on a service member awaiting trial or hearing. It is used when there's a reasonable belief that the service member committed a court-martial offense, is a flight risk, or poses a risk to unit readiness. When confined, the service member continues to receive full pay and allowances. So basically, it means that this person was arrested, and it's believed that this person was Navy sailor Jeremiah Copeland. And I have to note here, we only know this guy's name because Angie's mom's lawyer released it. Also, if you're watching, you probably can already tell on screen, but at this point in time, this person's identity, or their face, I should say, has been hidden, which is really, really frustrating. And his name wasn't even out there until about 10 days after her body was found. And I'm about to get into all this a lot more here, but the Navy has kept all of the details of this case super, super hush-hush, including the identity of this sailor. And yes, the remains were identified as belonging to Angie only one day after they were found. What hasn't been shared yet, though, is her cause of death. And I know that's frustrating to people. I know a lot of you are going to want to know what happened. We don't have those answers at this point in time, but a big reason why I wanted to cover Angie's case to begin with is because her mom has really been advocating for reform when it comes to how the Navy handles cases of missing soldiers, and I wanted to help amplify her voice. I mean, in this instance, she wasn't even notified by her daughter's commanding officer that her daughter was missing, which you think would just be the standard. Instead, she had to hear it from other people as well as the media, which is one of the worst ways you could possibly find out. And the same goes for her body being discovered, unfortunately. Then, of course, there was the delay in the investigation even starting, which is another major issue. Critical hours were just wasted. And then they waited days to start their investigation. For what? For why? So rightfully so, Esmeralda is demanding accountability. And a lot of what I'm explaining is really laid out well in another statement, so I'm going to read that, at least part of it for you. It says, the family remains unwavering in their pursuit of justice, especially after the heartbreaking confirmation that these remains are hers, which only strengthens their resolve to hold those responsible accountable. The family is calling on the assistance of the United States government, Senator Mark Warner, Senator Tim Kaine, the Hampton Roads congressional delegation, Home Congressman Vicente Gonzalez, and President Donald J. Trump to address the systemic issues that allowed her to vanish without justice since May 29th, 2025. The family demands accountability for oversight that put her life at risk and for mishandling that delayed justice, emphasizing the urgent need to address how official channels failed to notify them promptly and properly, relying instead on unofficial sources like the media, which underscores deep systemic failures. Knowing that her daughter, a service member, had disappeared, she was horrified to realize that she was not properly notified through official channels and that instead she was only informed unofficially by her daughter's staff and media coverage. This systemic failure to provide timely and official notification was unacceptable. Under the Constitution, Congress has the power to raise and support armies and to provide and maintain a navy, and it is their duty to ensure that these organizations function correctly. If the Navy cannot notify families properly and instead relies on unofficial sources, then Congress must investigate what has gone wrong. The Navy's failures threaten all families and the integrity of our military system, and Congress must reform these processes to prevent further tragedies for the safety of all families and for the integrity of our nation. I think it goes without saying that it is absolutely vital that our military has systems in place that protect people who serve, not only from outside sources, but also from the dangers within, which is really scary to think about. And the violence in the military, specifically against women, is just shocking and inexcusable. The fact that people like Angie have chosen to serve their country and their families have chosen to let their child serve their country, but at the same time, they can't be promised safety, at least from within, and then swift justice if something goes wrong. There needs to be a serious change here, which is exactly what her mom is both trying to point out and advocate for. And she's doing that by calling on state and federal officials. And she's hoping that these failures can maybe be rectified so that this doesn't happen to anyone else or anyone else's families. And I don't get to say this often. I'm really happy I get to say this, but some of her call outs have actually been heard and responded to by some senators. Senators Mark Warner and Tim Kaine have both spoken up about the tragic loss of Angie's life and have said that they are seeking answers. Virginia Senator Mark Warner specifically said, "I think it is important that we get a thorough investigation into what happened. If there was anybody dropping the ball on the timeliness of letting the family know that the soldier had disappeared, that needs to be corrected." He said the case raises questions. Why was the soldier allowed, basically disappeared, for a number of days before it was reported? And he's no stranger to demanding action. He actually played a huge role in establishing the Ashanti Alerts, which is a missing person alert system that's designed to help locate adults aged 18 to 64. It was established in 2018 and named after Ashanti Billy, a 19-year-old girl who was killed in 2017. And you would think that this would already be a system in place, but it wasn't. It's basically like an Amber Alert or a Silver Alert, but it's meant for adults who don't fall into either of those categories, which is a giant range of population. And supposedly, this alert was sent out in Angie's case, but not in a timely manner. And that is something that Senator Warner wants more answers on. And he believes an investigation into how her case was handled is needed. And I could not agree more. And he's not the only one in support of those efforts. But before I get into that, I want to explain a little bit more about next steps when it comes to this other sailor. So currently, Jeremiah is being held at the Naval Consolidated Brig in Chesapeake, which is a military correctional facility. And within 7 days of his arrest, they held an initial review officers' hearing to determine whether they would continue to hold him there or if they would release him pending charges. And it's similar to a bond hearing, except this isn't being handled in civilian court, so there's no bond. They basically decide if there's evidence to suggest that this person likely did it, and if so, whether or not they're deemed a flight risk. And I'm way oversimplifying it, but you know what I mean. And then after this hearing, they hold what's called an Article 32 preliminary hearing. And that is similar to a civilian preliminary hearing where they decide if there's enough evidence to proceed to a general court-martial, which is the highest level of military court. Basically, it's for the worst of the worst offenses. And in his case, it was decided that Jeremiah must remain in pretrial confinement during the duration of the proceedings. And Angie's mom participated in that initial hearing via phone, where she pleaded with the judge to not release him. She said, "Your Honor, my name is Esmeralda Castle, and I am the mother of Angelina Petra Resendez. I speak to you today as the voice of my daughter, because she no longer has one. Angie was more than a service member. She was a light in this world. She was brave, kind, devoted to her shipmates and her country, and full of promise. But instead of building her future, I am standing in a courtroom asking for justice on her behalf. The person responsible for this horrific loss made deliberate choices that ended Angie's life. Their actions were not a mistake. They were a betrayal of trust, of duty, and of basic human decency. To even consider releasing them would add another injustice to an already unbearable tragedy. Offering any form of leniency would not only dishonor Angie's memory, it would be a threat to public safety and a deep injustice to victims of violent crime. It would send the message that her life didn't matter. But it did. It still does. Angie deserves justice. Our family deserves peace. And our community deserves protection. I am asking this court to keep this individual confined because of the severity of what was done, not just to Angie, but to all of us who loved her. We cannot change the past, but we can choose to prevent further harm. Please do not let this preventable tragedy be repeated. Let justice stand. Thank you, Your Honor." And what's really shocking to me about this case is that her mom and friends had never even heard of Jeremiah. It wasn't someone that Angie had ever mentioned before. There was no relationship with them as far as we know, as far as she told anyone in her life. even a friendship or anything like that. So the lack of transparency here has made it all the more confusing. And this is really frustrating to have to tell you all, but currently he hasn't been officially charged with anything. They have 120 days to arraign him after this hearing, and that's when charges will be formally read. So it's just this, torturous waiting game for this family.
Well, the Navy sailor in confinement in connection to the disappearance and death of seaman Angelina Resendez is expected to stay in custody through the duration of the case. That's according to a lawyer representing the Resendez family. Last night, Angelina's mother, Esmeralda Castle, spoke to a judge over the phone, pleading for justice on her daughter's behalf. There are still many questions surrounding that case, including the sailor's identity, the charges that they face, and the cause of Angelina's death.
The NCIS says they will continue to gather evidence through witness interviews and forensic testing. And at this point, I guess we just have to hope that justice is on the horizon. And obviously, for her loved ones, justice doesn't only mean putting this monster away, but it also means ensuring that the Navy changes the way they handle these cases. And to help with this mission, Esmeralda has started working closely with the League of United Latin American Citizens, or LULAC. They are the largest and oldest Hispanic and Latin American civil rights organization in the United States. Now, if you are at all familiar with the Vanessa Guillen case, which I covered a couple years ago, God, time is just flying by, but I covered that case very thoroughly, and that one will always stay with me. It was so disturbing and insanely eye-opening to how many failures we have in our military, how many systems and protocols are not working. And LULAC ended up playing a key role in that case when it came to advocating for justice, supporting the Guillen family, and pushing for national reform. And when it comes to Angie's case and Vanessa's case, many people have drawn similarities between them. Of course, both of them involve a murder of a young Hispanic woman in a military setting, and in Angie's case, we have not been told yet if she was sexually assaulted. But for anyone who knows Vanessa's case, you'll remember that that was a very big element. But anyway, the same organization is standing behind Angie's mom, and I'm very happy to see that because I think that is going to be the best people to have in her corner, and they're hoping to really make similar strides for Angie and for others in Angie's position in the future. And just like her mom, they are calling for a transparent investigation into Angie's death. And they agree that the case was mishandled due to system failures. Despite colleagues and Angie's family raising concerns about her whereabouts as early as May 29th, they only labeled her as AWOL when she should have been reported missing. And of course, in those 6 days that it took to issue a missing persons alert, critical time was lost. Of course, it's hard to say without knowing all the details, but it's possible that she may have even been found alive if they treated this with the urgency that it deserved. They are also arguing that her mother had to take the lead in the initial search and had little support from the Navy or NCIS, which was a huge failure on their part. And they actually wrote out a list of what they demand happens moving forward, which was sent to the Secretary of the Navy, John Phelan, as well as leadership at the Department of Defense and Senate Armed Services Committee. So number one, like I said, they want a thorough and transparent investigation, including public timeline and accountability for every step of the Navy and NCIS's response. 2, they want accountability for any supervisors or command personnel who failed to take appropriate action. 3, they are looking for an explanation as for why she was initially declared AWOL rather than listed missing, which they say delayed the investigation. And 4, they want NCIS to confirm any NDAs that service members were asked to sign relating to this case. And yes, it turns out sailors were asked to sign NDAs. Next, they want a formal review of Naval Station Norfolk sexual assault and harassment procedures, especially as they related to women of color, which I couldn't agree with more. And 6 on their list is that there is a public apology and acknowledgement of the mishandling and miscommunication with Angie's family. For number 7, they demand a full enforcement of the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act, with its protections actively applied to this and other similar cases. And for their 8th demand, they want collaboration on a civilian family guide to support loved ones navigating institutional barriers after military tragedies. And lastly, they want continued transparency and access to documents under the Freedom of Information Act for Angie's family. Now, these were all outlined in a press conference that was held on June 25th, where members of LULAC shared their frustrations and demand for change. And in that same press conference, we actually did get to hear from Angie's mom, which obviously, I think it's much better that you hear it straight from her. So I'm going to play a clip of that for you now.
Yeah, I am the mother of Angelina Resendez. I am very grateful and thankful to be able to have support of people that care, who care about Angie, who care about people in need, who care about the voices that are being silenced. What happened is a tragedy. My daughter her life was taken by a sailor, someone that she knew, someone that worked with her. And all the things leading up to her missing for 12 days was a tragedy. The not reporting her as soon as it was reported to the command that Angie was missing, it wasn't reported. It wasn't reported the second day. It wasn't reported the third day. By Tuesday, once there was an official notice, it was already 6 days. By the 9th, the Navy, was not physically looking for her. It wasn't their responsibility to go out there and physically look for her. She was found by children in a wooded area and then sent home to me the way she was found, with no respect, no dignity, no honor. Why this happened? I don't know why it happened. Only that there is a system in place and it does not work. And I don't know if it's ever worked. And I don't know if anyone would acknowledge that there is a problem and accept responsibility for it to make a change. I'm trying to honor her as best as we can and bring awareness that this happens. This is continue to happen. There is a pattern and you cannot deny it. You cannot look away. It is in our face and it will continue to happen if nothing changes. Congress is responsible for our military. It is their responsibility to create them, to maintain them, to fund them, and to regulate them. If this is a failure on the military because they're failing to follow enacted statutes or codes of conduct that they're supposed to be trained on, it's our leaders should take action. They can stop this. They can change it. They can enact laws. They can make a way for families to have justice and this not ever happen again.
God, it is really, really, really hard to watch that clip, to look into her eyes. You can just see the pain. It's almost as if part of her soul has left her when her daughter did. And I cannot imagine being in her shoes and then having to tackle something as big as Navy reform and trying to point out all of these problems and make changes on top of getting justice for your child. I mean, that's just a fight that no mother should have to fight. And she is so very strong. And also, I don't know if you heard her say this, but she did mention that her daughter's body was found by children. And I don't have any more information beyond that. That is horrific. And I can't imagine what that was like for those children. It's just such a horrible, horrible scenario. And she's right. It is up to Congress to help remedy a very broken system that none of us deserve. And like I said earlier, she does have support from senators like Mark Warner and Tim Kaine. Senator Kaine said, quote, "She has a real right to be deeply concerned about this, and I am committed to her as a member of the Armed Services Committee that I'm going to be reaching out to the Navy to get some answers to some of the important questions she asked." And Senator Warner feels similarly that this family deserves answers and said that he was in touch with the Navy about this investigation and he will, quote, "be pressing for more information." And I really hope that they stand behind their statements and really see this through until the end. And there has been somewhat of a response from the Navy, and that came in early July. They released a 2-page memo that answered some of the questions, specifically as it related to the timeline of events. I've already sprinkled some of their timeline in the beginning of this episode so you guys would get an idea of what they said happened. But yeah, this memo was their official response. And to summarize it, They explained how Angie was classified as UA, or unauthorized absence, on Friday, May 30th after she failed to report for duty. The report said her barracks were searched during a wellness check on the 29th after her petty officer reported that he couldn't locate her after she contacted him. And like we know, they didn't find her in her room on that Thursday, but they did find her in the barracks of that other sailor. Then on the 30th, when she failed to report, they checked both her room and the room of this sailor, but neither could be located. And this is what they said prompted them to list her as UA. The memo also addressed the question of whether the UA status delayed the start of the formal investigation, to which the Navy said it didn't. One of the most important responses, at least in my opinion, was their response to the question about when the Navy first contacted Angie's mother and what information they actually gave her. They said she initiated contact on Saturday, May 31st by calling the quarterdeck to request information on her daughter's whereabouts. And this is when they told her that Angie was seen on the 29th in the barracks room of another sailor, but that she was absent on the 30th and 31st and that they were actively working to locate her. The memo also states that the NCIS spoke with Esmeralda every day between June 1st and June 11th, with the exception of June 7th as it related to her daughter's case. But of course, this doesn't align with what Esmeralda said happened, and personally, I believe her. If you remember, she claimed to have called them on Thursday, May 29th. And during that call, she was told that she was overdramatic about her concerns. Quote, "When I called, a commander told me I was being overdramatic. He said that Angie was fine and that I was exaggerating."
I called the quarterdeck. Her friend called me on Thursday night, from 8:13 p.m. on a Thursday, telling me that Angie called him asking for a pickup. He shows up, Angie's not there. He calls the chief and tells him what's going on. He calls me and tells me that what's going on and that I should call, the quarterdeck. And so I do, and I call and I speak to a Chief Anderson, and I ask him, "Hey, what's going on with my daughter, Angelina Resendiz?" He already knew who I was talking about. He told me that we found her. She was just in another room. It was a little, the report was a little more dramatic, than necessary. She's, and so I asked him to have her call me. We started calling her. She didn't answer. Friday, she was supposed to report to work. And when she didn't, and I called again. I talked to a chief, another chief, put their main chief, Parker, on the phone, and he told me she did not report to work.
And she actually thinks that her daughter wasn't even seen on that Thursday because they couldn't even tell her so much as what she was wearing. Their whole timeline is only based on their word. And as most of us know, some people I think will probably deny this, but there is just a long-standing documented history of the military protecting their own. And I mentioned it earlier, but Jeremiah did show up for work that following Monday. And according to Esmeralda, when they asked him if he had seen Angie, he said no. And at first, they just took his word for it, which is not acceptable. And either is the way that they treated her mother. They can say they followed protocol all they want, which your protocol sucks if that's the case. But the truth is, there was just a major lack of empathy and human decency along the way, which we should expect better from our military. And let's call a spade here, right? The broader military culture is one that does not treat every service member equally. We see it time and time again, and a lot of the time they end up in true crime cases. And this is very similar to what we heard Vanessa's family echoing, that she had told them similar things leading up to her murder. Angie had told her mom that sexist and racist comments were a reality for her, but she didn't want to report it because she didn't want to deal with the repercussions. She didn't want to cause any problems, make things harder for herself. And that's just not unique to her situation. That is an experience that so many people serving in our military have. Sexism, racism, and homophobia are just some of the issues that absolutely plague our military. And the fact that people who are choosing to serve their country have to deal with that type of shit. And then on top of that, we can't guarantee their personal safety. Outside of combat situations, obviously, but from internal situations, it's just unacceptable. It makes no sense. How can we actually allow that to be our standard? And that's why laws like the I Am Vanessa Guillen law are so, so important. And the day that passed, was a huge win. Now, if you haven't heard of the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act, or maybe you've heard of it, but you don't know exactly what it does, it criminalizes sexual harassment under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It improves how certain officials respond to sex-related offenses through independent investigations and removes the decision to prosecute sexual misconduct cases from service members' chain of command. And so for Angie's case, I'm hopeful that maybe some kind of law can be passed to help protect other service members going forward. And knowing that her mom has a lot of good people standing behind her, an amazing organization like LULAC, does lead me to believe that change is on the horizon. I hope that we see similar responses that we saw in Vanessa's case. And she also has a great attorney who I believe is already really helping her. At least that's how it seems from the outside. His name is Marshall Griffin. And yeah, from what I can tell, he's been a great support throughout all of this, and he seems to be very motivated to get justice. Now, back on June 20th, Angie's remains were flown back to Texas with full military honors so that she could finally be home. And it was an extremely emotional day. Dozens of service members and loved ones gathered to honor and receive her remains back in her home state. And the only way it can be described is absolutely heart-wrenching. I mean, just looking at the footage from this night, you can see how heavy everyone was feeling, the pain that they are experiencing. Just the footage of her mom embracing her casket. I cannot that has to be the most painful moment of someone's life. And if you aren't already pissed off, prepare yourself for this. And I debated on whether or not to even include this because it's so disturbing. It's disgusting and it's horrific, but I think it's important that people know how the Navy treated Angie. Esmeralda said that when her daughter's body was sent to the funeral home, she wanted to see her and say goodbye. And of course, she knew she wasn't going to be in great condition, but nothing could have prepared her for what she saw. And again, full warning before I say this is very disturbing, but Angie's body was covered in maggots, on top of all the other ways that she had been failed by the Navy, which she chose to serve. She didn't even get the dignity of them preserving her body. It's just absolutely despicable, if you ask me. And I'm not totally sure about this, but I'm thinking it probably has something to do with the fact that it took days to actually find her. However, of course, that did not stop her family from honoring her life. And her funeral was held on June 27th, and her mom asked people to come wearing white. There was a really, really beautiful service where loved ones shared memories and stories, and that was followed by a very impactful candlelight vigil. And there were just many powerful moments, including when a letter from U.S. Senator John Cornyn was read, which mentioned how he plans to do more about service members who go missing. And when asked about what justice looks like for her, Angie's mom said, quote, "I think for me, justice would be restoring something that is not there anymore. Restoring safety. I mean, you have the criminal aspect of it right now, and that is somebody that caused harm, but it isn't just about the person that caused harm, but about the entity that allowed it to happen." And I think she put that in the most perfect way that sums up exactly what I think justice looks like here. And then another candlelight vigil was held on Monday, June 30th by her former high school, and a few of her friends spoke, as well as her art teacher, who I mentioned earlier, that had such a profound impact on her life. And then Angie's command actually held a private service where about 100 of her fellow sailors gathered to honor her there as well. Esmeralda got to attend that as well and said that it was very important to these sailors that they got closure too. Despite it being so difficult, it was impactful.
There was a ceremony today for Angie by her, I believe it was the command, her ship. They organized it and put it together, and it was hard. It was hard, but I can't say it was nice. They did it for her. They did it for the shipmates to help them grieve and mourn and have some type of closure for her. They have traditions that mean a lot to them, and it meant a lot to them for me to be there. So that's why I came for them. At the end of it, every single person, we hugged, right? Everyone gave me a hug. Everyone gave me condolences. Some of them cried in my arms, and we just held each other. And so that part was the shift of the ceremony. Of all the ceremony, it was hugging all her friends that knew her and who she had an impact on, and then seeing that in them and feeling that and knowing that she's, has a space within them. Like, I can see it in them. And so that was energizing and healing. Like, the pain melted away for a little bit. Whatever Chip Bates told me about, he didn't say it. What he said was they had so many deep, lasting conversations that he's going to have for the rest of her life. One of them was apologizing that they wish that they could have done more to protect her. And so I had to reassure them that it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's going to be okay. They did what they could. They did the best that they could. One of her shipmates spoke to me really quickly about how she was working on herself, like personal development, like improving in her career in the Navy. And there were the people there that were helping her with that, showing her and guiding her and directing her. And it hurt them so much that all the work that she was putting in to herself and to the military, to her country, to her service, it's gone. It's gone, and there's nothing that they could do about it. And so those were the good moments. And just, they needed a hug just as much as I needed the hug. And so it was worth it. It was worth the trip down here for that.
Now, before I leave you guys today, I want to briefly talk about this other sailor, Jeremiah, who allegedly murdered Angie, and the very little information we know about him. And I did read that he was a culinary specialist, just like Angie, which I imagine is how they met, most likely. But again, as far as their relationship, we don't have any information. We don't know if there was even a friendship or an acquaintanceship or more than friends. We have no idea what that looked like at all. But again, going back to the fact that no one in her life had ever heard of this guy, and she never told her mom about him, I would venture to guess they weren't dating, but I don't know. It's always possible, I guess. Now, also though, when digging into this case, I did find out some things about him that I think are important to share. And that is that he had a history of domestic violence, which is very disappointing, not shocking at all. I'm going to link the TikTok video below if you want to check it out for yourself, but a very brave young woman spoke out on TikTok saying that Jeremiah sexually assaulted her, and she wasn't the only one. This is someone he dated from 2020 to 2022, and after they broke up is when this occurred. And despite going to the police and reporting him, she was, another big shocker here, dismissed by authorities. And in that video, she said there was another girl from their high school who says Jeremiah assaulted her. And the only punishment from that was getting expelled. Yet despite these allegations, Jeremiah was able to join the Navy. Is this the kind of people we want serving our country? I don't think so. And even if they weren't aware of what happened with his ex, there had to be some kind of record that explained why he was expelled, right? Or at least you would think so. You would hope so. So that was either missed or overlooked, which either way you slice it is a problem. And I really wish I knew more at this point about Jeremiah or about what happened to Angie. That's all I have for you at this time. Overall, I just want to say I couldn't agree with Angie's mom more, that protections need to be in place for people, especially women, in this type of setting who are choosing to serve our country. And God forbid something does happen, which of course things will always happen. The families of victims should not find out from the media. How many times do I have to report this in cases in the military and outside the military? We just deserve so much better. Now, I wanted to mention to you guys that currently there's a GoFundMe to help Esmeralda search for answers in her daughter's case. And like always, I'm going to have that linked in the description and show notes of this episode. As of today, when I'm recording this episode, about $17,000 of the $50,000 goal has been raised. So if you're able to or are interested in donating, that's a great way to show her your support. And like I mentioned earlier, my team and I are going to be reaching out to Esmeralda and offering her a hope grant if she wants to use it. This is a case that I'm definitely going to be following closely. I really suggest you do the same. And after this episode goes live, if there are any major updates, I'll be sure to pin a comment and let you all know. Justice for Angie is the only option. And I hope that for the sake of everyone, it comes soon. That is going to be it for me today, you guys. I just wanted to quickly say to everyone out there who finished this episode, went all the way to the end, I really, really appreciate you because I know it was very heavy, very complex, and also, lacked a lot of the information about the case at this point in time. But I know it is still important to talk about. And, I'm sure it means a lot to Angie's family that anyone is willing to take the time to hear her story. And we owe that to them. You guys are amazing. Thanks for tuning in. I will be back next week to discuss another case. But until then, stay safe out there.